This is the court reporter. I just want to remind you to please put your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. Thank you very much.
Court is in session.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, Your Honor. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. This is the eBay case 20 CB 1616, set for a hearing this afternoon by BTC, who's appearing for the plaintiff.
Your Honor, Ross Ziv and Milo Schwab for the plaintiff.
Defendant.
Your Honor, Melanie Lewis and Connor Carley for the defendants.
All right. You know the ground rules. Plaintiff, you have 5 minutes to make an opening statement starting now.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people of Denver showed up in masses to protest against acts of violence perpetrated on people of color by law enforcement in this country. The city of Denver responded. Peaceful protests were met with tear gas.
You're going too fast. Slow down, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Tear gas, rubber bullets, flashbang grenades, and pepper spray. The Supreme Court has repeatedly held that police may not interfere with orderly, non-violent protests merely because they disagree with the content of the speech or because they simply fear possible disorder. Plaintiffs acknowledge that the police have a very difficult, often thankless job where they're called on to make split-second decisions. The egregious behavior by the city of Denver and its invited officers was not in response to split-second decisions. What we saw is a pattern of preemptive domination and intimidation by the Denver police against largely peaceful protesters.
Mr. Zev, you're wasting your time.
Yes, Your Honor. Okay, let me get to it. Throughout this process, the city has declined to engage in meaningful discussions on how to promote safety towards these protesters until the legislature...
This is the court reporter. I'm sorry, it's too fast, sir.
Okay. Throughout this process, the city has declined to engage in meaningful discussions on how to promote safety towards these protesters until the legislature passed legislation restricting the city. Only then did they express such measures to be included in the extended. That TRO expires tomorrow. Plaintiffs have attempted to confer on a preliminary injunction for weeks. Continuously, plaintiffs have reached out to the city to seek compromise and clarity on issues. We were regularly met with a lack of authority, an inability to offer alternatives, the request to negotiate, and we have. Plaintiffs agreed first to allow DPD to lower the rank necessary to approve force from captain to lieutenant, and then from lieutenant down to sergeant. Plaintiffs agreed to include language excluding exigent circumstances to the requirement that leadership personally witness violence or destruction of property. Denver won't even agree to the requirements invited into Denver must limit themselves to Denver's policy on use of force. After the court's last email, plaintiffs called the city to ask if there is any language at all that they would stipulate to for a preliminary injunction. We received a clear no. Then 15 minutes before the hearing, we got a call agreeing to the same language that was included in the disputed language for the last extension of the TRO. The city of Denver resists any check on its power, asking the court and the people of Denver to just trust the city to do the right thing. But as the court found in its TRO, the Denver Police Department has failed in its duty to police its own. We asked the court to enter a preliminary injunction to protect the citizens of Denver against the excessive force used against those trying to exercise their constitutional rights to free speech, free assembly, and to be free from excessive force by their government. We also request that the court create a monitoring mechanism that requires the city to disclose relevant reports and video footage within a reasonable time period after force has been used on protesters. Defendants had concerns about such a disclosure. We offered a protective order as a solution. That solution was rejected. We've only been made aware of one instance so far following the entry of the TRO that needed these records to review. On June 12th, the defendant pointed us to the discretionary CCJRA to get the records, and they said that they forwarded that request to the records custodian. We've heard nothing since. The city is prepared to present body-worn camera evidence to this court today on a different incident that they believe supports its position. Because the city holds all the cards, has all the ability to get the body-worn camera, plaintiffs are left in the dark regarding the pepper spray incident after the TRO. Your Honor, we have witnesses and evidence prepared. However, it seems a clear idea on what you want to hear about, so we would like your guidance on how you would like us to proceed and what evidence and testimony you would like to hear. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Defendant.
Your Honor, Denver comes to this hearing today willing to agree on several items in the entry of a preliminary injunction as reflected by the parties' previous agreements and as noted by the court. Specifically, these include...
What are you willing to do?
We are willing to do the items regarding that track the new Colorado law, the item that was regarding all officers deployed to demonstrations or engaged in the demonstrations must have their body-worn cameras recording any and all acts of confrontation between police officers and others.
Why are you telling me that? You don't have any choice but to agree with what the law requires. What else do you agree to? I mean, you're not giving anything when you say we agree that we'll follow the law. You darn well better follow the law. Now, what else?
Of course, Denver will follow the law. The item that we are talking about, in addition to this, is the supervisor, sergeant, presence of the sergeant on the scene. As the court pointed out, at the point of contention... You're agreeing to sergeant on the scene? The provision regarding DPD or any person acting on behalf of DPD shall not use chemical agents or kinetic impact projectiles unless an on-scene supervisor at the rank of sergeant or above specifically authorizes such use of force in response to specific acts of violence or destruction of property.
So that goes even further than what Farley's brief said, right? That is what we're willing to agree to. The court, in its recent email to the parties, expressed that recognizing that there might need to be an exception when a sergeant does not personally witness the use of violence that would require an order to use one of these devices. And so what we would propose is that it could require the sergeant be personally present, because we also agree that it is appropriate to have a supervisor in the position of a sergeant present during such situations. But we would need an exception when the sergeant on scene is present but does not personally see the act of violence or destruction that warrants the use of one of these devices, and could rely on information from a fellow officer.
Okay.
And that is what we are willing to agree to today.
Yeah, and how do you wish to express your agreement, other than telling me about it?
Well, Your Honor, I think that the parties are primarily in agreement on the main terms of this injunction, and therefore, if we could reach an agreement, we would not need to go to a hearing, as you said in your minute order, and therefore we'd like the court's guidance on whether the court is considering entering an injunction on those terms that the parties have agreed upon.
I'm not even sure the plaintiff is going to be able to establish the elements for a preliminary injunction. But let's set that aside for a moment. What you're telling me is that, number one, although this seems silly to me, Denver would agree to a preliminary injunction that requires the same things that the new law requires. And number two, in addition, you would agree to put in the injunction that the chemicals and the projectiles would not be used unless a sergeant or above is physically present and approves the reasonable need for the use, with the proviso that if the sergeant or above is not physically present, is physically present but does not personally witness whatever it was that allegedly requires the use of chemicals or projectiles, he can be informed by officers who saw the incident and then make his decision as to whether to approve. You're willing to
That is absolutely correct.
All of that in an injunction? Okay.
Yes, we are.
I have no idea why we're here having a hearing then. Is there anything else you want to say in your 5 minutes?
Excuse me, Honor, if I could have 1 second to confer with my co-counsel.
Mm-hmm. You got a minute left.
Oh, okay. Your Honor, the only other issue that's not among agreement between the parties is the use of force, requiring non-Denver officers who are not parties to this case to comply with Denver's use of force policy before, or be trained and familiar with it before they come to assist Denver in emergency situations. We are not willing to agree to that.
Okay, I have to stand up and move around a little bit for the lights to come back on. I'm here by myself, and if there's no movement, the lights go off. All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I thought we lost you for a second.
No, you didn't. I heard you. What you said was
okay.
that you're not in a position to agree to enforce the same requirements against non-Denver police officers.
Right, and we are willing to agree that Denver requires outside assisting agencies use only the same amount of less lethal devices that they have been trained on themselves, that those agencies have received training on. The only other item on which the parties cannot agree is the plaintiff's dismissal.
Your time is up. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, plaintiff, I'm going to, as I said yesterday, permit the defendant to go first with whatever evidence they want to present, because I'm a little tired of hearing Mr. Farley complain and whine about not getting enough opportunity to speak for Denver. Go ahead, Mr. Farley. Call a witness, but don't waste my time, please.
Mr. Farley, we can't hear you.
There we go. Thank you, Your Honor, and I welcome the opportunity to put evidence into the record on behalf of Denver. My first witness will be Commander Phelan, Commander Patrick Phelan.
So, hello again, Mr. Phelan.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. How are you?
I'm good. You would have no way of knowing that one of your former colleagues, a retired Denver officer with whom you served and who knows you well, who speaks very highly of you, by the way, was picketing my house. After I issued that order, walking back and forth in front of my house with the big, what do I call it? Not red, white, and blue, but police version. And I had a nice chat with him while he was out alarming the neighbors and others. But he was perfectly peaceful, a perfectly nice fellow, and he thought highly of you, sir. Raise your hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
By the way, he told me you were soon to retire. I was sorry to hear that.
3 months, Your Honor.
Well, you're the kind
Maybe tomorrow.
You're the kind of cop that I'd like to have. Go ahead, Mr. Farley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Commander Phelan, how long have you been with the Denver Police Department?
In my 40th year.
And that's since 1980?
Yes, sir.
And you currently hold the rank of commander?
Yes, sir.
And what is your primary responsibility in your current position?
I'm Commander Special Operations Division. Special Operations Division is responsible for large events, parades, protests. Some examples are obviously March, Black Lives Matter, whatever march in the last, whatever protest is a large event, we'll cover that. The presidential debates, just anything, sporting events, whatever consists of a special event or large events in the city.
Commander, I'm going to touch on some of the terms that we just addressed that were disputed by the plaintiff's counsel. One of those was having a sergeant on scene. Plaintiff's counsel has proposed that the sergeant needs to personally witness every single act of aggression or property damage in order to order a disbursement or order the deployment of less lethal weapons. What is the difficulty that proposition presents to police officers responding in crowd control situations, crowd management situations?
Well, I think it's a good idea. Obviously, we want a supervisor to observe that if we can. Unfortunately, of course, there's more sergeants. The span of control of the sergeant is usually by 6 to 8 officers. So, you can't obviously be omnipresent, but it's just like, you can't see everything that happens around. If I'm riding with you in a car, you say, did you see that? No, what are you looking at? I didn't see that. So it's difficult for anybody to do that. But it makes I think it's more efficient to have a sergeant there because there's more sergeants on the street and their span of control is smaller. So they have a better chance of seeing what's going on.
And in a dynamic and fluid crowd management situation, one sergeant isn't going to, even present, won't be able to see every single thing that takes place, correct?
Correct. Be difficult.
And it's fair for a sergeant to rely on a statement from an officer looking the other direction. I just got hit by a rock from this direction. Those people just set a car on fire. Those type of examples, or whatever it is on the spectrum, that sergeant can then process that information, take that information as true, and order an appropriate responsive use of force.
Correct.
Plaintiffs, are you paying attention or just sleeping at the wheel? I thought I was hearing the testimony of Commander Phelan. Maybe we should have the lawyer take the stand if he's going to testify.
Reject, Your Honor.
Commander Phelan, my understanding is you also had concerns regarding outside jurisdictions having to comply or having to use the same less lethal devices as what Denver has issued. What is your concern with that?
Well, the concern is this, is what they're trained on. Obviously, other jurisdictions, I'm sure they're pretty similar. Their use of force policy is pretty similar. Their crowd management policy is probably pretty similar. They determine what less lethal options they want to use, what less lethal options what platforms they want to use. They select those platforms, and so they train on those platforms. So for them to use a platform they're not trained on makes no sense.
So you wouldn't want to issue a Denver less lethal device to an outside agency?
We wouldn't do that. We just wouldn't do that. They're not trained on that device. It doesn't make sense. It's dangerous.
And plaintiffs have also asked for the outside agencies to comply with Denver's specific use of force policy. What is the concern with that approach?
Well, they have their own use of force policy, their own procedures, their own policies. They handle all use of force complaints. They handle reports necessary with resistances. So it made sense. We've used that during DNC. We did the same type of process. They did their reports, their policies, their procedures, and filed those reports. So,
and Denver has already agreed to make sure or confirm, rather, with an outside agency that they have use of force policies and use of force training in place before they come to assist, correct?
Correct.
Yes, Your Honor, reading.
Sustained. Stricken.
Is Denver willing to enter into an agreement that would require the confirmation that an outside agency has a use of force policy in place before they're called in to assist?
Yes, of course.
The court's order on temporary restraining order said the Denver Police Department failed to police itself. Do you agree?
I disagree.
And why do you disagree?
Because the Denver Police Department, we have a lot of experience doing protests, hundreds of protests, peaceful protests. We take pride in doing that. On these situations, especially we understood in this protest specifically, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of potential there. So what we do, we create an ops plan. With that ops plan, we devise what we need to do with that. Our main mission there is obviously safety of life, protection of property, provide safety for the protesters, and that's what we do. Despite that the protesters walk on the street, which we let them do, they go counterflow against traffic, which is dangerous, but we want to provide that for them so they can safely protest.
And does the Denver Police Department have internal processes to investigate individual instances of misconduct that are out of compliance with policies and training?
Absolutely. Citizens are able to make complaints either through our internal affairs, through the monitor's office, through the mayor's office, wherever they want to make a complaint. Those complaints are processed through internal affairs and processed.
And is it reasonable for the internal reporting to be completed within the time frame that plaintiffs have requested be directly sent to their attorneys as opposed to via the internal processes?
I think the reality is it'd be very difficult. Even officers that work for me, I'd have a hard time getting those reports in that amount of time. It just days off, the amount of time to write it, different shifts. It takes some time. Downloading videos, recharging cameras, getting those loaded and downloaded. It would be a challenge.
And do you understand that Dick Castilian has submitted a declaration in this case addressing those concerns?
Yes.
Commander Phelan, I'm going to step back and talk a little bit about some of the use of force policies and use of force training that are provided to Denver Police Department officers. When does a Denver police officer or recruit first learn of Denver's use of force policy and its procedures?
When he enters the police academy. So he probably receive, I think, use of force, they'll probably receive 300 hours of use of force training, which includes obviously the legal guidelines for that, in addition to the use of force policy and arrest control tactics. So it's about a total of about 300 hours for use of force.
And does that training on use of force extend after the academy?
Right. They go through a PTO program, a training program. They got 12 to 16 weeks. I don't want to quote me on that time. It's spent with the training officer, and that's additional training there. And then periodically, we give training for use of force, bulletins, and crowd control issues.
And so that's ongoing training for officers.
Ongoing training. Additionally, they receive probably 120 hours on, probably 60 hours on constitutional law, another 60 hours on law from the city attorney's office, from civil liability, and they get the constitutional law, 60 hours from DA's office provides that training.
And that's training both on use of force and the right to free speech and free assembly?
Exactly. Constitutional is 60 hours.
When there's trainings on force tactics and force weapons, or use of force guidelines incorporated into that training as well, too?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to have Commander Phelan review what's been marked as Exhibit 8 and Exhibit 9. These have both been submitted to the court and to counsel for plaintiffs. And Commander Phelan, can you identify what Exhibit number 8 is?
Exhibit number 8 is the operations manual. The police department is the use of force related policies, 105.01 use of force policy.
And then the second part of that document?
Force and control. Obviously, additionally, the operations manual in the police department, 105.02 force and control options.
Okay, and so this is the Denver Police Department, two different provisions within the operations manual.
Right.
I would move at this time to have Exhibit number 8 and Exhibit number 9 admitted into the record.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right,
Thank you.
admitted.
Or, and I actually want to step back, and I appreciate the consideration of Plaintiff's counsel. We did not address Exhibit 9. It's the crowd management manual. But, you know, if you want me to go through it again, I'm happy to, or if it's admitted to Plaintiff's counsel's, you know, no objection, then we can just move forward.
No objection.
I appreciate it. Denver police officers are trained on the use of force policy, correct?
Right.
Okay. When are they trained on the use of force policies?
Watching the cabin.
And then is it
Just went through that.
is it a controlling document? Is the training consistent on use of force, consistent with the policy itself?
Yes, it is.
Okay. As far as use of less lethal weapons, specifically the 40 millimeter, well, strike that. Specifically, all less lethal weapons. I would direct your attention into the operations manual that, well, I'm sorry, into the crowd management manual, where it addresses communication for the use of a On the less lethal policy, I'm going to direct your attention to section 4, the communications. Can you explain to me how the less lethal policy interacts with the crowd management manual?
Well, the deployment of less lethal, the reason there's less lethal was developed is obviously to alleviate the use of lethal weapon in a case of different circumstances, whether it's a suicide by cop, whether it's an edged weapon, whether it's a mental person having some issues. Being able to have that option, that tool to use less lethal and alleviate that situation without using lethal option is why the less lethal was developed. As far as it's done how it's done on the street, how it's done in crowd management is similar, but rises to the threat of defensive resistance or active aggression against an officer or a third party. We're able to use those in that same type of manner.
Are there any areas that are restricted from using a less lethal weapon against?
Yes. There's during trainings provided, there's certain target areas. It's advised, especially on the 40 millimeter, to hit what's called large mass muscle area, meaty areas, which is the leg, the buttocks. We stay away from the head, the throat, the genitals, the spine. So those are areas we target when using that. Also, we can target a secondary target location, probably be an upper body, the shoulders, and probably the shins would be the secondary point of aim.
And is that true for a pepper ball?
Not quite the same as a pepper ball. Pepper ball doesn't have the kinetic energy that a 40 does. So that point of aim is probably from the torso down.
Who's authorized to carry and deploy a 40 millimeter or a pepper ball?
To carry a 40 millimeter pepper ball, you have to be selected by your command. It goes through up the chain of command, signed off by the division chief of patrols, and then they receive the training for that weapons platform. Can
an officer firing a 40 millimeter or a pepper ball fire indiscriminately?
You're responsible, whether it's less lethal weapon or lethal weapon, you're responsible for every trigger. Everything you send down range, that's your responsibility.
When you say responsible, you mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I chose target, I chose the trigger, send a less lethal projectile downrange. So I'm responsible for what I did.
Are there considerations of innocent persons being struck unintentionally?
Absolutely. It's not acceptable.
What were the first, in the broadest sense and briefly, what were the first few days of the protests that started in late May in response to the death of George Floyd in police custody in Minnesota?
Well, obviously we were aware that what happened, the murder of George Floyd by a police officer up in Minneapolis, and we knew there was a protest coming. We made an ops plan for that protest. We were hoping, as we always hope, it's a peaceful protest, which we usually count on. Those protests, those first 3 days, they start peaceful. I think the majority of people there are there to exercise their First Amendment rights, which is great. And I think there's a lot of people there also that were very angry. They wanted a confrontation. They wanted a confrontation, which with the police, which we were there. Based on our operations plan, we took that into consideration. Part of our deployment was, low profile, avoid confrontation, low visibility. Try to help them get through their protests in a peaceful way.
There were incidents of violence and property destruction in the early days of the protest in May, correct?
Correct.
Can you describe those?
Well, initially, too, what we wanted to prevent, too, we allowed them to have a peaceful protest. What I wanted to prevent is them from going onto the highway. That's such a dangerous situation where cars are going 85 miles an hour and then there's people on the highway. They try to force their way on the highway. We try to prevent that, deny them the highway. Officers received rocks and bottles there. A couple officers were We responded with some pepper ball munitions there to try to get them off the highway. We also tried to deny them, we don't want anybody setting fires, buildings on fire. We don't want anybody taking over police departments or public buildings, so we try to prohibit that too. There was some looting going on. There was a lot of criminal mischief. We try to, based on our operations plan, we try to have a lot of mobile responses to those, so we were able to at least address those, go to those locations, and get that behavior stop. Unfortunately, once we got there, the police became the target of that. I want to make sure I differentiate between protesters and rioters. There's a lot of people down there who are just protesting. We get it all the time. It's great to do that. I've been involved with it myself in the past, but this wasn't the same faction. Those are people there that wanted confrontation for whatever reason. I can't say why. And confront the officers.
Did the use of force that the Denver Police Department was authorized to use consider the viewpoint or the message of the protesters?
No, not at all. You're able to protest. It's your First Amendment right. You're able to protest. You're able to assemble. You're able to, whatever your issue is, that's fine.
And so it's the conduct of the
Absolutely.
violence and other issues that you just raised.
Their behavior dictates our response. Is what it comes down to.
Have conditions changed since the end of May, beginning of June?
Yes. Matter of fact, the conditions changed probably after the first 3 or 4 days. We were trying to avoid any type of confrontation with them, and seemed to calm down a little bit.
You saw less acts of violence and less.
And we moved that direction. I'm trying to say, like I say, same thing, low visibility. Try to avoid any type of confrontation, yet trying to facilitate them while they protest and go on their march.
Are you aware of any recent 40 millimeter or pepper ball firing by the Denver Police Department?
No, not after the first few days, no.
That's all the questions I have for Commander Phelan. I'm happy to call my next witness, or will cross-examination happen now?
Cross-examination.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let me know when you're ready.
What did you say?
I said just let me know when you're ready, Your Honor.
I'm ready. You're consuming Mr. Farley's time. Get with it.
Yes, Your Honor. Commander Phelan, have you reviewed the videos that have been part of the original complaint file? I can't hear you, Commander. I can't hear you, Commander. You're on.
I apologize.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
No, I have not. I have not viewed any videos at all, actually.
You haven't seen any videos that have been included in this case at all?
No, sir, I have not.
Okay.
I should have been on vacation. Okay. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I've been on vacation. I'm due a lot of time off. I'm trying to take that time off before I retire.
So, do you know whether any of the videos included in the complaint have been investigated?
Sir, I couldn't hear you very clearly. One more time, please.
Do you know if any of the videos that have been included in the complaint have been investigated by the Denver Police Department?
I know there's several videos that are being investigated. I couldn't say if those were the ones. I haven't seen those.
So, Commander, as you sit here, have you seen any conduct by the Denver Police Department that occurred as part of the Denver downtown demonstrations that violated Denver policies?
No, I haven't seen any videos.
So, are you here to say? Are you saying that Denver's response during these protests was reasonable?
Yes, based on the total circumstance.
How can you say that without seeing any of the videos that have been presented in this case?
I was the incident commander of the situation. So I know when the officers were deployed, where they were deployed to, and what actions they took.
Okay.
I wasn't privileged to see every type of deployment. No.
Okay. I'd like to see
anything. I haven't seen anything.
Okay. Okay. Your Honor, I'm going to present to the witness what's been previously marked as Exhibit N. 1 second to share. Commander, just please let me know that you can see the video. Can you see the screen, Commander?
Yes, I can.
I don't know where Monkey's at. I don't think he came down.
Commander, was that a reasonable response by the police in downtown Denver?
Objection, it calls for, speculation.
Objection is overruled. I'd like to know his answer.
That's the first time I saw that video. What I see is there's a confrontation, obviously, between, looks like a citizens and police. Looks like pepper ball, from my vantage point here, it looks like pepper ball was deployed. To use that as, I don't really have the 360 of that whole scene, what happened, but I couldn't say if the application was illegal or not. But there are situations, if that individual thought, you know, that he shouldn't have been hit with pepper ball, then complaints should be made on that. I can't judge from right now. That has to be investigated. And if it's getting determined that was illegal or wasn't a proper application of pepper ball, then that's a situation.
Okay, let's talk about that, Commander. You say that that incident, if that individual didn't believe that it was proper, that event should be investigated, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is that a quick process?
I'm sorry?
Is that a quick process?
They'll make the complaint. They want to make the complaint too. It's filed with the Internal Affairs Bureau. They investigate that complaint. I'm sure there's a timeline when they have to get those complaints finished. I couldn't answer that question. As far as quick, what do you determine is quick? I think it's, my concern is to be more thorough, to be a thorough investigation. I don't know how long it takes, sir.
Commander, if it was found that that officer did not follow police department policy, would you expect that the investigation would get him off the street this week?
Objection, again, calls for speculation, with incomplete evidence.
Commander, speaking of investigations, are you familiar with an OIM investigation into the way that the Denver Police Department handled the Occupy movement back in 2011?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Are you aware that the police department, that the OIM, Office of Independent Monitor, determined that the police did not have an adequate response to that protest and encouraged the Denver Police Department to further investigate it?
No, I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't the commander in 2011.
Are you aware that you've been on the force since 1980, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware that Denver failed to investigate the prior protest back in 2011 that the OIM said that they should investigate?
Objection, misrepresents testimony.
I don't know if it misrepresents testimony or not, but it's irrelevant to what I'm dealing with today. That video, though, is not irrelevant. And I want to ask the commander a question. What we saw in the video, and I understand that videos might miss things, there may be other things going on behind the camera that we don't see. I understand that. But based on just what we saw this guy outside his car yelling and screaming. And then we saw pepper balls or whatever those clouds were all over him. Now, if that's all that happened, wouldn't you agree that that was inappropriate?
Your Honor, if that's all that happened, I would agree that's inappropriate. I just don't know what happened before that, or.
Okay,
I can't.
I get that.
It should be investigated. Yeah, he's hit with OC pepper ball. That's obvious to me. Why he was hit with it, I don't know.
Right. I mean, isn't it pretty obvious that there were protesters and then there were people who crossed the line into violence, into destruction, into looting? On the other side of the line, there were the majority of peaceful cops doing their job, and then there were people who got out of line. Don't you at least?
That's a possibility, Your Honor. That's
well,
a possibility.
I think it's a fact. It's not a possibility. It's a fact. And I don't want to doubt your credibility. So I want you to admit what needs to be admitted. I understand where you're coming from. Onward. Any other cross?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to show another video. This was previously promoted as Exhibit F. Yep. Okay. 1 second.
What exhibit is this one?
This is Exhibit F, Your Honor. F is in Frank.
Your Honor, I would object to the extent that he's asking for Commander Phelan's opinions on videos that he hasn't seen and had time to review.
Nonsense. Go ahead and show the video.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That video showed me absolutely nothing.
Did you?
Yeah, I had my glasses on, but I really didn't see anything.
Did you? Okay, let me replay it, Your Honor. We're looking for a pepper ball being fired at a bystander at the very end of the video.
Okay.
Your Honor, to expedite this, we have a witness here today who was on that video.
You're just using up your time. You're using up your time.
I'm hoping to have, the plaintiff is showing videos. I don't know when he intends to stop showing videos. I have 2 other witnesses to call, but he's showing Commander Phelan videos, which he's already testified he hasn't seen. I'm just proposing that the witness who was on scene be the appropriate person to testify to that incident.
Okay, thank you for that assistance. Now show your video again, if you want to.
Okay. Well, Your Honor, I'd like to move. I'd like to move that the complaints, that the videos listed in the complaint are moved into evidence.
We would object, Your Honor. We repeatedly asked for the time, date, location of those.
We'll go one at a time if we have to.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay. So.
The first one was impressive to me. The second one was not.
My apologies, Your Honor. Can you see me? All right.
We don't see anything.
You don't see anything?
No.
All right.
I didn't either. And by the way, Mr. Zeev,
Yes, Your Honor.
Zeev,
Yes,
why aren't you wearing a mask? You're right by your colleague.
Yes, Your Honor.
He's wearing a mask. Mr. Farley's wearing a mask. Why aren't you?
Yes, Your Honor. Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
We do not see anything.
Yes,
Your Honor, I would ask to reserve this period of time, when they are having technical difficulties to be able to use for a witness.
Okay.
Try another way here. All right. Can you see anything now?
No.
All right. I don't know what's going on with the technical part of this. I'll move on to my cross-examination, Your Honor. Commander Phelan, you had mentioned that you believe the police have adequately policed themselves. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. How many complaints were there filed by an officer against a fellow officer as part of these downtown Denver demonstrations?
Objection, calls for speculation.
It does not call for speculation. It probably calls for something he doesn't know.
And you make a foundation objection as well.
Commander?
Yep. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
Let me ask you this. Commander, have you heard of one single complaint from one officer against another officer as part of these downtown Denver demonstrations?
No, sir, I haven't.
Now, you had mentioned the use of force policy and the training that these officers did on the use of force policy, correct?
Correct.
And what Denver would like is that each individual officer on scene is able to make their own determination on use of force without having a sergeant personally witness the act of violence or destruction, correct?
But those officers make those decisions every day. They're on the street by themselves.
Okay. Commander, are you familiar with a news article that ran with an Instagram picture of a Denver police officer that was tagged, "Who wants to start a riot"? Are you familiar with that post?
I did see that, yes, sir.
Okay, and that was a Denver police officer, correct?
That was a probation officer that was immediately fired, yes, sir.
And he had joined the force in October of 2019?
I believe so. I don't know.
And he was fired.
He was a probationary officer, though.
Okay. And that probationary officer, had he not been fired, would have been on scene for those downtown demonstrations, right?
It's possible.
And that officer would have been able to make his own determination. The officer that posted, "Let's start a riot," he would have been able to make his own determination on when to use sponge rounds, correct?
If he was trained in that, and he wasn't trained because he's a probation officer, but he was trained on that platform, and I'm not sure why he posted what he posted.
So you're saying right now that this officer that was on the force since October 2019 was not trained?
Mr. Diaz, I would get off a screen share, please. Thank you.
Judge, that mischaracterizes the testimony.
Commander, did you hear the question?
You want to repeat it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, are you testifying that this officer who has been on the force since October 2019 had not been trained?
No, I'm saying he wouldn't have been trained in the use of a 40 millimeter or a pepper ball, a less lethal impact weapon. He wouldn't have been trained. He wasn't a first officer yet.
When did
that? It takes 4 years for an officer to become a first grade patrol officer. So he wouldn't even be eligible because that he's barely with the TO, if he's even off with the training officer. He still might be with the training officers. So he wouldn't even qualify to be carrying anything like that.
Would he have been qualified to carry pepper spray?
personal pepper spray, you would be qualified. All officers are issued what's called personal pepper spray. It's it on the utility belt.
Would you accept that a further trained officer would be in a better position to make a call on when to use force?
They received the same training. He'd maybe have more experience, but it's still the same training consistent with the use of force policy and the crowd management policy. So I don't know I couldn't say if he'd be more qualified or less qualified. He'd have more experience.
What about a higher rank officer like a sergeant? Would they have more experience on when the appropriate use of force is?
It's the same training, which is consistent.
Would you trust higher rank officers to make that determination?
I trust hopefully every officer to make that determination.
Are you familiar with the incident that happened, I guess it was Sunday after? The incident where a group of protesters were pepper sprayed after the court's temporary restraining order went into place?
You'd have to give me more information on that. Was that during a protest? I don't recall anything during a protest. Anybody getting pepper sprayed?
Are you familiar with any demonstrations of force by the Denver Police Department after this temporary restraining order was entered?
Objection to the ambiguity of that term.
I think you should rephrase that question.
Yes, Your Honor. Commander Phelan, you were on the hearing with the court when the court was when the court got a hearing on the temporary restraining order. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were familiar that order entered that night, correct?
Correct.
Are you familiar with any incidences where pepper spray was unleashed on demonstrators after that TRO was entered?
No, I'm not. Not any demonstration I was involved in. There was none when we had an operation plan and we set up a command post, but there was none. I'm not saying there wasn't pepper spray used, but it wasn't used in one of our operations.
Commander Phelan, the video with the gentleman in the car that you just saw, was he a protester or a rioter?
Objection to the foundation.
Yeah.
He was a loud-spoken gentleman. No indication that he was a rioter. He was a protester on the video. He might have been a rioter otherwise, but not on the video.
Now, Commander, you said that the behavior of the individual dictates the response by the police department. Is that right?
Correct.
From what you saw on the video that was shown, what was the behavior that dictated that response from the police department?
Well, I don't know. For what I saw on the video, I can't say what happened prior to that. I'm with the judge too. They fired a pepper ball on him. I don't know. It shocks the conscience a little bit why they did that. I don't know.
Okay. Let me rephrase that question, Commander. Did you see anything that gentleman did that dictated that response of the pepper balls by the Denver Police Department?
Objection to the foundation.
He's already said
I could respond.
he's about it. I think he and I understand perfectly well what the facts are, and I think that he and I understand that if that's all that occurred, it was inappropriate. Onward.
Do you agree with that statement, Commander?
Yes,
It's been asked and answered repeatedly.
Sustained.
Okay. Commander, do you take responsibility for the actions, does the city of Denver take responsibility for the actions of other jurisdictions and how they acted during the downtown demonstrations?
I object to the ambiguity of that question to the extent it calls for a legal conclusion as opposed to a factual conclusion from this witness.
Okay, overruled. I'd like to have his statements about his view of the conduct of other officers from other jurisdictions.
I would just also like to make a record that this is not a 30B6 deposition, he's not a 30B6 witness, that he's not testifying on behalf of Denver as an entity as opposed to a fact witness for Denver right now.
Okay. Gosh, it's great to have lawyers teamed up on both sides to help us with all these explanations and objections. Somewhere I want to hear what the guy has to say, because this guy has a lot to say that I'm interested in.
Can you repeat your question on that? It was about an outside jurisdiction. I apologize. Go ahead.
Commander Fallon, does the city of Denver take responsibility for the actions of other jurisdictions at the downtown Denver demonstration?
Yes, they're working as an agent for the Denver Police Department. We ask them for help. They come to help us, or they're acting as an agent for us.
Do you think it's appropriate for outside jurisdictions to use a different use of force policy than the Denver Police Department itself is required to use?
Well, I think I talked about that. They are trained on their use of force policy. They're trained on their less lethal munitions, and they're trained to do to the policy and the report. So, yes, I think they should be doing that.
Sorry, you think they should be doing what?
Using their own use of force policy. Using their own less lethal munitions.
If I may just have a moment, Your Honor.
All right, the moment is over. Redirect examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Commander Phelan, who makes the determination to call in an outside agency?
It would be by the Chief of Police, Manager of Safety.
Chief of Police, Manager of Safety. And so their determination of the legal relationship between the city of Denver and outside agencies would control as opposed to your determination?
Yes.
That's all the questions I have for Commander Phelan. I appreciate it.
All right, next witness.
Your Honor, I would call Lieutenant Thomas Pine.
Lieutenant, do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I like your hairstyle.
I do. I like yours as well. And I also like to be brief, which I know you like as well.
I sure do.
Thank you. Lieutenant Pine, can you state your current position and the length of that position?
I have been a lieutenant in the Metro SWAT K-9 section for 7 years.
And did you have a role in the response to the protests and resulting crowd activities following the death of George Floyd in Minnesota?
Yes, I did. As a result, or as the commander spoke, as part of special operations, I responded as part of the department's response to the situation. I was specifically assigned, and the Metro SWAT section was assigned as rapid deployment vehicles. Obviously, our overall mission was the protection of property, the preservation of life, the protection of people's right to freely assemble, the protection of their First Amendment rights, and also, like I said, protection of property and life safety.
Lieutenant Pine, where were you deployed on those first few nights?
So as the rapid deployment vehicle, we were essentially deployed everywhere that a hotspot came up. If there was a violent incident going on, if officers were taking rocks bottles, that's where we went.
Did you see any rocks thrown?
Absolutely.
Did you get hit with any rocks?
Multiple times.
Do you have rocks that hit you with you today?
Yes, I do.
Can you show them to the court? About how big are those rocks?
That's the size of my hand.
Okay. I want to address an exhibit that plaintiffs submitted with their complaint, Exhibit L. You're depicted in that exhibit, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And I'm not going to try to play it, to the court, but Exhibit L, can you, describe to me what is shown in that video?
So what's shown in the video is a field force line consisting of district officers from District 1 and District 5, backed up by Metro officers behind them. There's a Metro RDV, which is Rapid Deployment Vehicle, which we initially responded to that specific location for a 911 call from a citizen trapped in a car by protesters. The video shows me pointing towards a crowd. I was at an area of the crowd where I was receiving rocks and bottles. I was hitting the face with a bottle right in front of that RDV, and there's a couple rocks and bottles visible on the ground right in the video as well. I pointed towards the section of the crowd where the bottles and rocks were coming from. We had made repeated announcements. Lieutenant J.D. Williams actually did it over the PA, requesting the crowd leave. We needed to get those cars out of that crowd. During our initial response, we tried to get in there, just the Metro guys, and get those people out. We were caught. We had to make 3 arrests. We were assaulted. We called for help. That's when District 1 and District 5 showed up. We began making announcements. We gave them 10 minutes warning, orders to disperse. We told them which direction we wanted them to leave. And we gave them 5 minutes warning, 3 minutes warning, and continually took rocks and bottles until we did throw the initial gas that is shown being thrown. And that was actually a smoke. It was not any kind of chemical irritant.
And so plaintiffs have characterized Exhibit L as, quote, video of police throwing tear gas unprompted into a peaceful crowd. Is that an accurate representation of the circumstances as you were there on the scene?
100% no.
Were the protesters, in response to the 10-minute, 5-minute, 3-minute warnings to disperse, were they given an opportunity to leave that area?
Absolutely.
And where would they have been directed to leave?
We directed them to leave to the east, down 14th, or to the south, down Sherman.
And were the violent protesters the ones that you see in the front line of protesters, or somewhere else?
No, they were back behind from the state capitol area.
Okay. Hidden in the crowd behind the front.
Correct.
Was there anything notable about the uniforms that the District 1 and District 5 patrol officers were wearing?
They were not in their full riot gear. They had their helmets on and their gas masks on, but they were still in their patrol uniforms, which means essentially that they came down rather quickly, were called to this situation, and at no time did they have time to get their full riot gear with them. So it was the first night of the protest, so they were prepared for that kind of violence.
And have you seen a change in the type of violence and violent protests that were occurring in that first few days of protest activity in May and early June?
Yes, I've been out on the street and in the command post, and since the Sunday, so the 4th night, I think since then, we have not had any confrontations. We've done exactly what the commander spoke about, protecting their First Amendment rights. We've protected blocked streets for them so they don't get run up on by traffic. So, no, I have not, and I'm not aware of any violent confrontation after Sunday, which would have been the first, I believe.
That's all the questions I have for Lieutenant Pine.
Cross-examination.
Lieutenant Pine, have you seen the videos that have been part of the complaint filed in this case?
Yes.
Okay, have you seen all of them?
I'm not sure if I've seen all of them. I've seen several.
Okay. Can you describe some of the videos that you have seen?
I know I saw the one that you brought up with the RDV, and the last one you brought up that we could see. I saw the car video. I saw one of a lady blocking our RDV as we were trying to get to a call for help, where we pepperballed the ground beneath her, and she left, and it accomplished its purpose.
Okay, I'm going to try this one more time to see if we can figure out how to do this. So just bear with me, I appreciate it. And Your Honor, I'll start by moving Exhibit L into evidence.
Exhibit L. Okay, it's admitted.
This is the one. Thank you.
Yes, it's the one that just said your description was 100% wrong.
Right.
It's admitted.
All right. Okay. Are you able to see this?
No,
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. What do I hear?
We just have a white screen.
And I don't know what to do about this. Your Honor, I thought that there was an IT person on the line, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Is there any way we can get a little bit of help here? I don't understand why it's not working, and these videos are very important for us to enter into evidence.
I can see it on my screen, so I'm wondering if it might be an issue with defendant.
I can see it also.
This is the court reporter, and I can see them also.
Okay, so.
We know what Exhibit L is. We can probably show it internally, but we just can't see if you point to specific things.
Well, what I can see is one guy standing there. I can only see him from the shoulders down, holding some long object.
And that's fine, Your Honor. If we can have the witness see Exhibit A somehow, Connor, can you get Exhibit A up in front of him?
So Exhibit A or Exhibit L?
A is an apple.
Oh,
would you like me to try to pull it up on my cell phone?
Do you have access to all the exhibits on your cell phone?
They were emailed to him.
I don't know if I can pull them up. I haven't seen it.
well, I also thought he said L. Now he's saying he said A, Exhibit A.
Yes, Your Honor.
So I admitted L. I didn't admit A.
And Your Honor, we did ask for L to be admitted. I'm just going back to A now.
Oh. So you're zigging and zagging on your exhibits.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm going to try to lay the foundation on these, but I can't do it unless the witness can see the video.
Well, he can. It's a cop standing there with pink boots on.
All right.
Yes, we've pulled it up.
Okay. Lieutenant, have you seen this video?
Yes.
All right. Did this happen at the downtown Denver demonstrations? Can you confirm that this officer is a Denver or a jurisdiction that Denver has invited?
I can't determine that at all, actually. I don't know where the video is. It's a very short video. I can't even hardly make out the badge.
Well, let's be clear here. It's not a video at this point. It's just a still.
Right. Right, Your Honor. Okay.
You can't see the guy's head. But it makes sense that he's either a Denver police officer or one of the ones that came in from another jurisdiction. He sure doesn't look like one of the protesters.
Lieutenant Pine, can you confirm that that is a Denver officer or an officer from an outside jurisdiction at the Denver protest?
I'm not going to say for sure because I can't tell exactly where it is. It sure looks like it because of the RDD in the background, but I don't know. And I can't tell if it's a Denver cop because he's wearing his full turtle gear, so it's obviously the second day. But I can't for sure say it's a Denver officer or somebody who called in to help.
Okay. But can you confirm it's one of the two, either a Denver officer or an officer someone called in to help?
As long as the video came from downtown, but I don't know that.
I ask you what's going to happen at least?
Do you see anything you can? Sir, if that happens, we're going to start beating the fuck out of you. Can you not tell from that video whether it happened downtown?
It could happen anywhere. It's a street.
Okay. All right, I'll move on. Look at this fuck guy. He didn't know. Okay. Now I'm showing what's been marked as Exhibit B. Can you bring up Exhibit B?
Is there a video being played?
No, I'm asking you, can you bring up Exhibit B? Are you able to?
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
Can you, go ahead.
okay, go ahead.
Can you confirm that Exhibit B took place at the downtown Denver demonstration?
Yes, that looks like one of the streets downtown, and there's RDVs there.
Okay. Your Honor, we'd like to admit Exhibit B into evidence.
Yeah,
No, I'm gonna object to the,
I can't see it.
we don't know the time, of that video. I don't think there's any foundation for that video to be admitted. Other than he admits that it's, you know.
I can't tell. I can't see it anyway. It's not showing to me.
All right. This is crazy. And put your head down. Look at this fucking guy. He did nothing fucking wrong. Fucking nothing. Look at you. Just fuck you standing there. Hey, what the fuck? What the fuck? You never say me.
All right, well, I saw that. It didn't tell me anything at all. So I'm not going to admit it because it was nothing burger as far as I could see.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, wrap up your cross. Mr. Farley's hour is already more than passed.
Lieutenant Pine, did you?
Largely because of the plaintiff's cross-examination.
Lieutenant Pine, did you see any conduct by any officers downtown at the downtown Denver demonstration that would violate Denver's use of force policy?
No, I did not.
Did you see any conduct at the downtown Denver demonstrations that you believe was inappropriate coming from officers?
No.
Okay. And you said you did review several of the videos as part of the complaint. None of those videos struck you as inappropriate uses of force?
I would object to the foundation, and it calls for speculation.
Overruled. You may answer.
I've seen the videos, and without knowing all the facts and the totality of the circumstances, I can't say one way or the other.
Lieutenant Pine, have you heard of any officers making complaints against other officers for their use of force as part of the downtown demonstration?
No, I have not.
Okay. I have nothing further for this witness right now, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Connor.
Your Honor, I have no redirect, Your Honor.
All right.
I would request, since we only used 29 minutes of our
Give you a little more time. Don't waste it
I
by
appreciate
asking
that.
for it. Call your next witness, but
I understand.
make it brief.
I'm going to pass to co-counsel to call the next witness.
Your Honor, we call Sergeant Carla Habbard.
Habbard, H-A-B-B.
Havard.
Okay, hi there. Sergeant.
Hello, sir.
Sergeant, swear to me that you will tell me the whole truth and nothing but the truth, please.
I do.
Okay. Go.
Right. Sergeant Habbard, who is your current employer,
I'm a sergeant with the Denver Police Department,
and how long have you been employed there?
22 years.
And what's your current title?
I supervise the citywide impact team.
What's the citywide impact team?
It's a crisis mitigation community engagement team under Chief Payton.
Were you involved with the police response to protests that occurred on May 30th, 2020?
I was.
And could you briefly describe your role in the protest response that day?
My team was partnered with the citywide secondary team, Sergeant Simmons and his officers, as a rapid deployment team, and we were operating on a RDV. That's one of those vehicles where you see the officers standing on the side.
Okay. And earlier, you were present while a video was played, showing one of those vehicles with a bunch of, officers standing on the side.
Yes, I did see a clip of that.
Did you recognize that video?
I did.
And that was Exhibit F to the plaintiff's complaint? Do you know?
It was quite a few videos. I can't remember exactly.
Okay. How did you recognize the video?
It appeared to be myself and my team, on one of the, deployments.
Do you know when it was taken?
It had to be taken on the 30th, on May 30th.
About what time of day?
No, I'm not exactly sure, maybe 6-ish.
Can you explain what was going on, with your unit at the time that video was taken?
At the time that small clip of video that I saw?
Well, let's explain the small clip of the video first, what was going on in that video as we saw it.
On that video, we were retreating.
Okay.
We had come under attack. We were taking rocks and bombs. We were overwhelmed, and we were retreating from that area.
And can you explain what happened immediately before that video clip, which is not depicted on the video?
Yes, initially we were deployed to that 1400 block of Lincoln, on the south side of it, to serve as a barrier for that street. We were told that the officers from the north end of the street were going to deploy smoke and or gas in an effort to clear the protesters and violators off of the street. And our role was to form a barrier or skirmish line to prevent them from continuing south on the street and either go into Civic Center Park or to the Capitol to exit off the roadway.
Were you able to be successful in forming a skirmish line?
Very briefly, we were completely overwhelmed, and we only had 8 officers on the line, most of whom did not even have less lethal tools with them, and we quickly became overwhelmed and under attack with rocks and bottles and other debris.
Can you explain what you mean a little more by under attack?
From the skirmish line, we only had 8 officers, and that portion of the street is very lengthy. So we stretched them as widely as we can. When the force of the hundreds of protesters started running toward us from the north to the south, we just became overwhelmed and enveloped. And then they started throwing rocks at us, collapsed the line. I called in the vehicle to come and pick us up so we could retreat from that area. It wasn't safe for us.
Was there any other items thrown at you besides rocks?
Yes, a few items that they had water bottles filled with some sort of canned liquid. We don't know if it was iced tea or gasoline or urine, but that was being thrown at us. I personally got hit with a can of soup because it hit my leg and then hit the ground and it burst open and my pants leg was filled with that. We got hit with rocks and other chunks of cement. I don't know where exactly that came from, but that was pretty much it.
Did officers under your supervision at that time use pepper ball?
Yes.
And did you feel that was an appropriate use of the pepper ball?
Yes, absolutely, I did.
And do you know, could you tell who they were aiming the pepper ball at?
Well, we were aiming the pepper ball at the direction and at the people that we saw, and we identified that was throwing rocks.
Okay.
And or other debris.
Great. Those are the only questions I have.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Sergeant Hubbard. Did you see any conduct at the downtown Denver demonstrations that you believe was inappropriate by the officers there?
No, I did not. Certainly not by my officers, and I wasn't aware of anything else.
Are you aware of any complaints by an officer against another officer for any of the conduct that happened at the downtown Denver demonstration?
You know, I wasn't aware that those were coming in. No, I'm not aware of that.
Sergeant, how long have you been on the force?
22 years.
In those 22 years, have you ever been made aware of a report from an officer against another officer for excessive use of force?
In 22 years, have I been made aware that an officer filed a complaint on some other officer?
For an
Is that
excessive...
the question? I think I'm unclear on the question.
Yeah, that's
Objection is beyond the scope of direct.
Okay, overruled. Go ahead and answer.
You done to ask it again, Sergeant?
Yes, if
She
you don't
knows.
mind.
She knows the question.
Okay.
I've recorded over 22 years. I've heard rumors of, when officers file complaints, of course, the rumor mill happens, but I don't know of any personal officer who has filed complaints, but sure, I hear of complaints eventually that have been filed against officers for various things.
By another officer
Okay.
for excessive use of force?
I'm sorry, that didn't come through.
By another officer against another officer for excessive use of force. Are you familiar with any complaint?
I can't recall that. Most of the time, it's because of some sort of domestic situation that I recall hearing about different complaints.
When you said that pepper balls were shot at the incident that you just described, how confident are you that you hit the wrongdoers?
Well, certainly that was our goal and that was our intent. And I can tell you that after the sporadic rounds of pepper ball were fired, the rocks stopped coming and the debris ceased from hitting us. So I would imagine that it was very successful.
How many peaceful protesters would be an appropriate amount to hit with the pepper balls in order to prevent somebody else from throwing one of those rocks?
Objection, Your Honor, that calls for speculation.
Okay, overruled.
Answer? Mm-hmm. Actually, we don't target peaceful protesters. One of the main criteria for using those tools are for people who are engaged in civil unrest. So we wouldn't target a peaceful protester. So the answer would be none is appropriate.
Do you believe that you hit pepper balls on anyone that wasn't being violent?
There's always that possibility, but it certainly wasn't our intent. It was a very fluid situation. It was very chaotic. People were moving around, but that was not the intent, but certainly a possibility.
And you just fired in the direction of where you believe the rocks came from, correct?
No, we fired at the individual that we saw that was throwing the rocks.
How many rounds did you fire? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I personally didn't fire any rounds.
How many rounds do you remember being fired?
I don't have a number for that. I know it was not continuously.
Was it more than 10?
I can't give a specific number.
Okay. Sergeant Howard, do you believe that the police adequately police themselves?
Absolutely. I think we have systems and processes in place and checks and balances in place. Absolutely.
Now, Sergeant Howard, in 2011, the city settled a lawsuit in which you were involved in, and you were accused of excessive force while you were off duty, correct?
Yes, I did have a case like that. I wasn't sure if it was 2011, but yes.
And that got settled out of court, correct?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Your Honor, if you give me a little leeway, Your Honor, if you give me just a little leeway, yes, sir. Okay. Can you pull up Exhibit F with your counsel, Sergeant Howard, please?
Okay, it's up. I'm watching it.
Okay, is this the vehicle that you were on?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, let's watch this. Your Honor, I move Exhibit F into evidence.
No objection.
I thought I already admitted it, but it's admitted.
Okay. Sergeant,
Yes,
are you familiar with the officer that fired that shot?
not so much. That was my, first time working with him.
What's that officer's name?
All red,
Ulrich? And
yes.
were you in a position to see what that shot was in response to?
Let me refresh my memory. I know that we were taking rocks and bottles from the west. I was actually pointing and directing the less lethal officers to engage people that I saw that were throwing rocks and other debris at us.
I'm sorry, are you watching the video again? Is that what's going on?
Yes.
Okay. As part of that video, do you see any rocks coming from the direction that officer shot in that video?
At that time, I wasn't facing toward that way. I was facing the opposite way, trying to get the driver to get us actually the heck out of there. But I know that we had been continually taking rocks and other debris. But no, I did not see.
Do you see any action in the video that you just saw that would make it appropriate to shoot a pepper ball at that person filming?
Objection foundation.
Overruled.
There's been no discussion of who's filming.
Doesn't make any difference who is filming.
I think I've lost your question, Counselor, if you don't mind.
That's okay. Thank you, Sergeant. Sergeant, my question is, do you see any actions in that video that would make it appropriate to shoot a pepper ball in the direction of where that video was filming?
Absolutely. I know that we were taking rocks from that west side, and it looked like the pepper ball was fired to the west. So that answer would be yes.
Okay. So you believe that was appropriate without seeing anything else there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have anything further, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, that will conclude the defendant's presentation now. Does the plaintiff have any presentation?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go. Oh, first let me ask the court reporter, do you want to break here?
Yes, if we're going to be going a while longer.
All right, let's take 10 minutes here and resume.
Court is in recess.
We'll resume at 3:14.
What a joke. Well, what do you think about this so far, people? I think this judge is kind of an asshole and he doesn't really want to be here, but he's going to have to sit through it. There's no video at all. No video at all. How long did they schedule this hearing for? I have no idea. We could be here for hours. We're already into an hour and a half right now. I'm staying with it as long as it's going on. And I want to thank everyone that is sticking with me through both lawyers suck, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm with you there. They're not very court savvy at this point, right? They're both kind of, seem like they just got out of school or whatever. The judge is a jerk. He sounds like he's on the protest. Yeah, YouTube watcher, that's a good point. I think that the judge is on the protesters and the filmers' side. honestly, but you never know. They can definitely deceive you in that black dress of theirs. All right, let's see who else in here. We got Peanut, Vulgar, Joe Cool, Unsubpressed, YouTube Watcher, Princess and Pirate, Ignorant Pleb, Uncontrollable, um, YouTube Auditor, Genesis. Thank you all for being in here. Top Rock, Citizen Z. Wow, so many people. I saw Eric Brandt was in here earlier, and it will be back. We will be back live with them here in just a few minutes. They said they'd be back at 3:14. So if you need to go grab a drink, anything like that, go to the bathroom, hit that thumbs up, and share this with your friends because I'm gonna hang out and listen to it. It's very interesting to hear from a judge's perspective, and to hear the actual testimony of what happened during the protests. Right? Hopefully, it turns out to be a decent asshole judge. Yeah, we can only hope, right? Let's see here. Was that someone said P and P is in here? Oh yeah, Pirates. Yeah, Mega Me. It is a shit show. Um, I agree. Craigslist, thank you very much. You shared in the Discord. Thank you, YouTube watcher. Stretch your legs. Go get you a drink. Make that other pot of coffee. Yeah, absolutely controllable. I enjoy court hearings personally. It may be very boring to everybody else, but I really enjoy it. It's just me. Share to your Facebook. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. All right. Let's see what we can do for you guys. What time is it? I don't want to run off. We've got just over 5 minutes. Brandon Maxwell, I don't know why it's suggested to you, but we're listening to the federal court hearing on the police brutality during the protests in Denver, Colorado. So you may want to hear it, you may not. Nika. Yes. See, you kind of get where I'm coming from. Can more people call in to listen, or is it just the beginning? Safety Man, if you want to go and check out this on your own and you want to call them yourself, you can voice your opinion in the chat for sure, Brandon. But if you want to go and listen for yourself, Safety Man, the info is in the description. Oh, Joe Cool. There you go, buddy. Pass it around. And from my understanding, we're going to possibly be able to hear Ghost Rider and Otto. I don't know if they're going to be on. They might not. But their videos are absolutely being admitted into court as evidence. So we'll hang out in the chat for a few minutes and wait for them to come back. We got about 5 minutes. I'm going to step away and go to the restroom. I will be right back.
Court is in session.
All right, plaintiff. Go.
Thank you, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls John Reed. If you're on the phone, John. John Reed, are you on the phone? John Reed, will you please take yourself off mute?
In case he does show up, how do you spell his name?
John, John, last name is Reed, R-E-E-D. Yeah. John Reed, are you on the phone? All right. My co-counsel will go figure that one out. I'll call Kevin Krieger.
Spell the name.
K-E-V-I-N, K-R-E-E-G-E-R. Kevin, are you there? I see you're there. I see you on mute. Kevin, if you could take yourself off mute.
I don't see
There,
it.
did that work?
There we go. Yeah, that works. Thank you.
Sorry about the delay. It was, for some reason, switching from my headset to my computer. I didn't know it was going to do that.
Sorry. Mr. Krieger, would you please introduce yourself to the court?
Well, just a minute.
Sure.
First of all, I have to swear him in. Hold on. I don't see him, though. I see Mr. Farley. Probably a good idea to call Mr. Farley. Ah, there he is. Okay, Kevin, raise your hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir. I do.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Krieger, will you please introduce yourself to the court?
Sure. My name is Kevin Krieger. I live in Broomfield, Colorado. I'm not sure what else you want to know.
Mr. Krieger, have you ever served on government, any sort of government?
I have. I was a city council member and county commissioner here in the city and county of Broomfield for 4 years.
Mr. Krieger, have you been able to attend any of the downtown Denver demonstrations?
I did. I went on one day. I went on the first Saturday, maybe the third day of protests or so.
Okay. Mr. Krieger, I'm going to walk you through your experience there. What brought you out to the protest?
Well, what brought me out was wanting to participate in a movement that stood for something that I very much stand for, which is complete equality for all people in government and under the law.
About what time did you get down there?
About 2:30, I think, in the afternoon.
If you'll just walk us through what you saw when you first got down there.
Sure. So, well, I went to the state capitol, and there were really a large number of people around the Capitol building on the west side. I had a cardboard sign, saying to get rid of corruption in government and in the police, and many other people did too. So there were a couple of people on the steps of the Capitol that were trying to speak to the crowd using a very tiny speaker, like a home karaoke kind of speaker, and no one could really hear them, but people were looking at them and just kind of milling around, standing around, chatting.
I'll walk you through it. So at any point did you see the protest move from that spot?
Yeah, twice. Once everybody kind of went down into Lincoln from the Capitol and from the lawn. And, some people set up cones and led the crowd kind of in some chants, basic chants. And then the crowd moved again. It would be north towards Colfax. And so both times I went with the crowd. The second time was a little confusing. I didn't know where everybody was going. I had just gotten there, but I followed the crowd that went down Colfax going to the east. And so I went that way too. There seemed to be a plan and people seemed to know where everyone was going. And we went 4 or 5 blocks down and took a left. I think that was Washington. And then we were on a street adjacent to a police department. And we would have been on the west side of the police department. And we stopped there because there were police in the road.
So why don't you tell me what you observed as far as the police go at that intersection?
Well, so it wasn't really an intersection. We went about half a block down Washington, so it was right in the middle of the block of Washington. It would have been between Colfax and 16th. And there was just a tremendous police presence. There was something that looked like a small tank with somebody standing out of it with a gun and, SWAT type, just kind of heavy armor stuff. And I thought, oh, okay, this is where everybody was walking to, is this police station, a protest or something. I didn't know the crowd, I think, had been doing a regular circuit, like just a big circle or something, leaving the Capitol and coming back. I thought this was the point, was to go to the police department. And since the police were across the road blocking, everybody stopped, and everybody just kind of started doing some basic chants, Black Lives Matter, or say their name, say his name, stuff like that, and just kind of milling around. On the other side of the street from the police department, there's actually a bunch of homes, it's residential. Those people came out and were, clapping or cheering or filming with their phones. And everybody just kind of was milling about, basically.
Okay. Mr. Krieger, I want to know, what was your observation as far as like the energy level of the crowd? How was the crowd?
The crowd, clearly by their presence was angry and wanted to show it at some of the racial injustice we've seen, but nobody felt angry. I mean, honestly, people were just kind of chatting, to be honest with you. Sometimes you would hear somebody, while we were walking, there was a young woman, maybe in her 20s, let's say, talking to another young woman about a date she had. Just kind of very casual. People were chanting, and there was some energy behind that, but no real outward anger, no feelings that anyone was going to lose control. I didn't see anyone lose control. I didn't see anybody on the verge. I didn't feel in danger. And in fact, I was not even going to go to this because I didn't want to be around anything that could turn dangerous. I was completely danger averse and felt very comfortable. It was actually fairly relaxed, and it was also not very dense. I walked more or less to the front because it was so easy, because it wasn't dense, and people were just kind of either standing and chatting or just milling a little bit, just kind of moving around. It was fairly calm. People certainly cared, but it was calm, and I thought this is where we had arrived, and this is what we had arrived to do.
And Mr. Krieger, I do understand there were some acts of aggression from the police after that, and we're going to get to that in a second. But before we do, did you hear, before there was conflict, did you hear any warnings or did you hear anything from the police?
No, absolutely nothing. And I was way up in front. It's a skinny one-way street, Washington there. So, I mean, I was right there by the police. There were a couple of times that a protester would come across and say, please leave more room for the police. Not that it looked like anything was spilling over or the police had asked, but people left room. I was right there. There was absolutely no warning of any kind at all. Nothing, not even an indication that something was about to happen.
So tell us what happened next.
Well, there was a police officer that was part of this line that was standing on the east sidewalk, so it would be the sidewalk directly adjacent to the police department. And he had something that looked like a rifle. I don't believe it to be an actual rifle, but I think it's one of these pepper ball rifles. And he was shooting shots down the sidewalk, just one after another, bam, 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 bam. And as I was looking and just processing, it just took like a second to process, like, what the heck? I was seeing really in a half second, then all of a sudden somebody screamed something, said he's going to shoot or something. Then there was a flash bang thrown into the middle of the crowd that exploded close to me. And then more flash bangs. The crowd surged, and because they were coming into the middle of the crowd, the police, I think, wanted everybody to go back south towards Colfax, south on Washington to Colfax. But if you were up kind of anywhere in the upper part of this crowd, you were being pushed the wrong way. So the crowd surged. There was a tremendous amount of panic. People screamed. People ran. At some point during all that or around that time, tear gas was deployed. I moved with the surge, which was back away from the police department across the other side of Washington, but unfortunately slightly to the north too, away from Colfax, just because everybody went out in a radius from whatever explosion, whatever flash grenade or a canister of gas. And then, as soon as I was mainly in protection mode, and as soon as it was clear enough, I ran with the crowd towards Colfax and ran through the tear gas to do that. And then the crowd stopped at Colfax. Some people just ran and scattered. There were people that were throwing up or dry heaving. There were people pouring milk on other people's faces. My eyes and skin were stinging. I couldn't breathe. Some people stopped and waited there at Colfax. I was one of them. I don't know if you want me to tell what happened after that or not. That there was more after that. I don't know if you want me to go on or not.
Go ahead, Mr. Krieger.
Well, so everybody was on Colfax except for the people that had left. So it was a smaller crowd. And by the way, before that all happened, we'd been standing by this police department for a substantial amount of time, maybe like 15 minutes or something, could have even been 20 minutes. There just was no indication at all that anybody was doing anything wrong or there was any problem. So when people amassed back at Colfax, after about just a few minutes, maybe 5, the police started coming up Washington towards people. And as soon as they started walking even towards Colfax, they were firing tear gas ahead of them towards Colfax. And as far as Colfax, it was coming out, coming down Washington, and the gas was in the intersection of Colfax. So then, like with a lot of people, I started moving, jogging as quickly as the crowd allowed, back to the west towards the state capitol where we had come from. We were backtracking. And the tear gas was going right down the street between the buildings, just being carried by the wind. Everybody was in a cloud of it. And to be honest, it's not just the tear gas that makes you cry and irritates your eyes. I did not know really what it was before. You cannot actually breathe it. It is a chemical that your lungs won't let you breathe. It isn't a matter of breathing hard but burning. You can't even suck it in. When you're in a cloud of it, there's almost nothing that you could possibly do to get out of it except hope that you're running fast enough to get out of the cloud before you're done holding your breath. And so everybody just ran back towards the Capitol, and people were kind of spread at that point throughout Colfax, the Capitol, and maybe Washington a bit. Some people certainly left already. And then after another period of about 50, police actually started backtracking. They started retreating, moved backwards north down Washington. Somebody had made the decision that the protesters could go through after all. So after all that, the police backed up down Washington. All the protesters came down Washington and started cheering. And then we did this big loop with about 4 or 5 stops where people would chant and things like that. And they would set up cones and have flags. And I guess I learned that this was just maybe one of the stops on the entire loop at that point. And so we finished the loop. It was like a mile and a half loop or whatever, 3, 4, 5 stops, ended up back at the Capitol building.
Mr. Krieger, have you been back to a downtown Denver demonstration since then?
No.
Why not?
Well, I think for 2 reasons. I mean, one is that, honest to God, even though it seemed mostly peaceful, I was very leery of going to anything that even could turn violent. thinking that it would be the protesters turning violent. I didn't want to be caught up in it. I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't want to be injured. I didn't want anything like that. And my kids actually advised at dinner that I should go down the next day. They said, just go in the daytime. If there's bad stuff, it'll happen at night. I said, all right, I'll go down. I'll be real cautious and I'll see how I feel. I don't know if I'll stay. But after that, I realized it wasn't the protesters where I was. And I've heard so many other stories about protesters acting badly in other places, and I'm positive that's happened. But it was not the protesters where I was. It felt unsafe. It felt like it was now not just me being part of a group of people expressing our opinion and demanding change, but it was actually two groups confronting. And that's not what I ever wanted in the first place. I was there to be part of a peaceful protest, to make my voice heard. I was not there, and nor do I believe almost any of those people were there to confront police and actually have it turn into a battle like this. And that's not what I was interested in. That was not what I wanted to participate in. I wasn't willing to repeat that. To be honest, my skin, my arms and face burned for the rest of the day. My voice was so hoarse for 3 days that by the end of the day, for 3 straight days, I could barely speak. I had no interest in going back for a number of reasons. And I'm not, a young, angry kid anymore that, is going to go down every day and spend hours or go down at night and cause a ruckus or anything like that. So I was never going to be down there any day anyway, but I did want to participate, and it encouraged other people to, and was kind of happy and proud that my kids encouraged me to. But after that experience, that's not what I was looking for. That's not anything close to what I was looking for. It's not what I wanted to participate in. I wouldn't go back.
Thank you, Mr. Krieger. Mr. Farley may have some additional questions for you.
All right, cross-examination.
Mr. Farley, we can't hear you.
I cannot hear you.
So when you can't hear a lawyer, just count your blessings.
How about now?
Yes.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Krieger. Did you file a complaint with the Denver Police Department regarding this incident?
No, I did not.
Never told anybody at the police department or the city about this incident?
Correct.
That day, I think it's May 30th, is that correct? That first Saturday?
I do not know the date. It would have been about the third day of protest. I'll trust your
Okay.
data. Okay.
After the initial retreat from the District 6 Police Department, you said you continued the protest route that day?
After all of this tear gas deployment and everything, the police did end up moving to the north down Washington to let people through, and it apparently alerted maybe a couple of the leaders of this whole group to that fact. And we did at that point continue to go on the loop that had been planned. Correct.
So you didn't just go home immediately?
That is correct.
Okay. And the police didn't give you that?
I am
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I was going to say, to be honest, at that point, I was absolutely and utterly infuriated. I was not going to be going home at all. My entire demeanor had changed. I was very angry.
The police did give you an egress route after the chemical deployment?
Well, they let us go back to finishing the loop. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you were not trapped where you had been.
That is correct.
Did you see any fireworks being thrown by protesters?
No.
Did you see any bottles or rocks being thrown by protesters?
No.
What was were you able to see behind you between Colfax and the District 6 police station, what was happening behind you prior to the deployment of chemical less lethal weapons?
Well, so I was up near the front by the police. I was, in the very, very front of the crowd. That was about half a block north of Colfax. Certainly there were enough people in the street that I would not have been able to see Colfax generally. Now, the crowd wasn't very dense. Like I said, people were all kind of just milling about. I might have been able to get a glimpse of Colfax, but probably I could not see that entire half block from my vantage point. As far as who was behind me, I mean, I was just kind of standing there looking in different directions. Anybody could have been behind me at any point. But as far back as I could see, which was a pretty good distance, maybe half of that entire crowd, all I saw was people kind of standing around, taking turns leading chants, sometimes waving a sign. Generally holding signs, a lot of people.
What time of day were you at the District 6 police station?
Well, I got downtown in Denver at super roughly 2:30. Maybe it's 2:45 or something. Had to walk for a while because I couldn't park by the Capitol. Then we went into Lincoln. Then we went to the police district. So I just have to estimate the time. You'll understand. But I'm going to say if I was down there parking at about 2:30 or maybe a little after that, maybe by that point it could have been 3:30-ish.
Okay, the sun was still out.
Could have been 3:30, could have even been a little later, might have even been as late as 3:45 or even 4 o'clock in that time frame.
Okay, but the sun was still out at that time?
Yes. Yeah, it was daytime.
Did you see any property damage or vandalism?
Not there. When we finished the loop, I did see one person spray paint some wood boards on the side of the building. Somebody else ran up and pushed them, and he yelled and ran off. That was not here. That was on the 16th Street pedestrian wall.
One protester pushed another protester?
I presume so, yeah. There was somebody, there was this huge march, and part of our loop was to go down the mall. And at one point on the mall, since you asked about damage or whatever, there was a person that had spray paint that was spray painting like some boards that was over a business or something. And then somebody ran up and shoved him hard, and he kind of fell back and yelled and then ran off.
You're not a plaintiff in this lawsuit, are you?
Well, I am not sure of my exact title, to be honest. It's for the lawyer. When I saw the story in the paper, I did reach out to say that I was there and this was wrong and I wanted to be a part of this. Now, I'm not one of the four main named people. I don't know actually what my legal status is on the case, to be honest.
Okay. Have you reviewed the complaint and the video submitted with the complaint?
I did review the complaint. I'm not sure if I reviewed a video submitted with the complaint. Several videos, I'm not sure. You'd have to reference the one. I'm not sure if I've seen the one you're talking about.
Well, I guess you didn't take any videos, did you, that were submitted with the lawsuit?
Oh, none of the videos are mine. That's correct. I do have videos on my phone. They were not submitted as part of this complaint, I don't believe, no.
And you don't know of any videos submitted with this complaint that depict you or a scene that you were in, do you?
That is, well, I don't even know how many videos are in the complaint, let alone, I could attest that I've seen them all. I've seen 3 or 4 videos. None of those were the scene I was describing. I would imagine, since we were adjacent to a police station, that there should be video of that block, especially with a massive police force there. There should be tremendous amounts of video from both the station and body cameras, as well as bystanders, because as I said, across from the station, it's residential. Tons of people were out just with cell phones, or people participating like me with cell phones. So there's video of us standing right there on my cell phone. I do not believe that it was submitted, and I'm sure that I've turned it over, so I don't think it's part of the complaint.
Okay. Did you, were you hit with any sort of impact device?
I was not, no.
Did you see anybody else get hit with an impact device?
I saw a woman on the ground who appeared to have been. It could have been someone else, something else, but as the crowd was kind of surging towards Colfax, she was on the ground holding her back, and there were about 4 people trying to help her up. She had kind of pulled herself, it seemed, a little onto the curb on the west side of Washington. That is, I did not see anything else that appeared to be people being directly hit.
Okay. If a protest gets violent or people are destroying things, should the police let them?
Sheriff, Your Honor, speculation.
Overruled.
I am sorry, should I answer?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I think there's obviously, great judgment calls. In general, first of all, the protesters never should get violent. And I wanted to take the utmost precaution that I was not entering into something where I could be participating in anything that could be violent. Never. If they do, and they sometimes do, that's clear. If they do turn violent, I think it's a judgment call, just like I might have to make with, one of my kids. If I find out that a teenage kid is drinking alcohol, what do you do about it? It's not as easy as just a quick answer. It depends on a lot of circumstances. I would say in general, the police do not want to certainly encourage it or let people do that. However, it has been stated that a broken window can be fixed, that, scorching my throat with a chemical cannot. So there are cases, I think, where even if it is minor, the violence itself is smaller than the violence of the police in some cases. Now, where I was not aware of any violence. And maybe there was something that happened I didn't see. You alluded to maybe something way behind me, but I was up by the police. I was up right in front. And the police never seemed to be under any siege or feeling threatened. I didn't feel anybody was threatening. There was never an ask of any type for anybody to move back or retreat or to stop standing there. So this was not an example of that. But if this had become bad enough that police use of force is actually less destructive and less harmful than whatever the protesters are doing, at that point, use of force is probably the right call.
So, Mr. Krieger, if a police officer is hit by a rock from a slingshot, what do you think he or the police officers around him should be able to do?
Certainly at that point, if that had, let's say, happened in the crowd I was in, I think at that point the police should address the crowd with a speaker or bullhorn, or even stand there just in front of them yelling and tell the crowd that we cannot have this, that a peaceful protest is fine, but if there is any type of projectile thrown or any type, then they have to disband everybody. And I think they'd have the right to do that. I think if something is growing in danger for anyone, it is stop it and nip it in its bud before it goes too far. I think the police had a right to tell people that they wanted to disband. If somebody hits a police officer with a slingshot and I have nothing to do with it, and I am not remotely a part of it, and I am going out of my way to make sure I'm not caught up in anything like that, I do not expect to be treated like I shot a police officer with a slingshot. Now, again, if the police can't distinguish, the crowd is turning mob mentality, it's a bit frenzied, everything is dangerous, they might have to cut it off, move everybody out. I understand that could definitely be the case. This was not the case in any resemblance where I was. Maybe other places.
Thank you, Mr. Krieger. That's all the questions I have.
Redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next witness.
Your Honor, we call Megan Matthews.
You know that your guy Reed, he showed up on the screen during the examination.
I see that, Your Honor.
Megan Matthews.
Can you see me or hear me?
Yes, Megan, would you
Hello?
raise your hand, please? Do you swear
Yeah.
or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Ms. Matthews. Hi, will you tell the court what day you went down to the downtown Denver demonstrations, please?
Yeah, I was down there Thursday and Friday, the 28th and the 29th of May.
Great. I want to talk to you specifically about the 29th, that Friday. Now, I will, we are aware that you got hit by a KIP, and we're going to get to that, but will you tell us what you were doing before that?
Right before or like much earlier?
Just a little bit earlier, kind of tell us what was going on at the demonstrations.
Okay. We for most of the day. We've got large cases of water and granola bars, apples, stuff like that, and then some. So we were down passing that out. And,
We're having difficulty picking her up. It's in and out.
Yeah. Megan, it's going in and out. Can you ask other people at home to get off the internet for a second? That might help.
Yeah. Yes, I can. Let's see. Okay, let's try that. Can you hear me okay right now?
Yes.
Okay. Try something.
It seems like you're cutting out again, Megan.
Okay.
How about this? Why don't you work on that? I'll call the next witness and we'll come back to you, okay?
Okay, I'm going to get an Ethernet cable, so.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Your Honor. My co-counsel will take the next witness. Good afternoon. I'd like to call Gabriel Thorne.
Hey, Milo. Got me?
Okay. Now, what's this gentleman's name?
Your Honor, this is Gabriel Thorne.
Okay. Mr. Thorne, do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor, I swear.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Thorne, can you tell me what your present job is?
I currently work for the state of Colorado. I manage the vital records office.
Okay. And can you tell me what your background is, your education, and other previous work?
Yes, I'm a retired Army officer, and I have a Master's of Public Policy from the University of Denver.
What days did you go to the downtown demonstration?
I went on Friday, I believe 29th, and I went on Sunday, I believe was the 1st.
And how much longer did you spend this Saturday? What were you there to do, and what role were you there in?
I went down there to serve as a medic because I had heard about a lot of injuries that had been sustained through various protests around the nation, and then I had friends who had gone down there and had told me about a lot of injuries that had been sustained on Thursday night. So I had some pretty extensive experience with medical training through my long career in the military. So I went down there Friday night to provide medical aid to protesters on the ground.
Okay, so why don't you run me through a little bit of what you experienced on Friday night or Saturday night while you were down there?
Friday.
I apologize. Friday night.
Yeah. So I got down there around 5:30ish, and it was mostly peaceful. I called up with the main group as they were around the City Hall area, and they were just assembled, listening to speakers who were on the steps of City Hall. It was mostly peaceful, almost entirely peaceful crowd when I was at City Hall. And what I noticed, though, was there was commotion coming from the north side. So I went over there, and I witnessed police doing drive-bys on the crowd. They were driving by shooting pepper balls at the crowd. And so, yeah, the police testimony is correct that people are throwing water bottles at them, because I would see cop cars driving past, shooting into the crowd with pepper balls, and yes, the crowd would throw water bottles back at them. I didn't see them throwing rocks at this point because there are no rocks over around the area that they were shooting at. But yeah, they were throwing water bottles, plastic water bottles, back at police cruisers that were shooting them with pepper balls. I didn't see any provocation for this. I did see police shooting into a crowd with what looked like an intent to just rile them up. So after that, the speeches kind of wrapped up, and the protest moved up to straddle Lincoln in Civic Center Park and Capitol. And the police were over on the other side where the buses line up, and it was just kind of a standoff there. There were a bunch of police cruisers lined up. Police were all kitted up in riot gear. Occasionally, what looked like SWAT would show up, and it was just kind of a back and forth at that point, with a bunch of protesters on one side, a bunch of cops on the other. The cops were shooting across the street with pepper balls and rubber bullets, and throwing flashbangs, and throwing just the occasional tear gas at them. And then some protesters would occasionally respond by throwing a rock back at the cops or water bottles. And there didn't seem to be any real discernment between the protesters who were just over there chanting and the protesters who were throwing rocks. But they were far enough away that protesters who were actually like trying to do anything against the police had to come out of the crowd. Like, they had to actually go out into Colfax to throw anything at the cops. So they were easy to shoot at if you were trying to shoot pepper balls at them. But the police didn't seem to be doing that. They were still just shooting into the crowd and throwing tear gas into the crowd. So it wasn't the line that I keep hearing about how they were just shooting at people who were attacking them doesn't ring true to me, because that's not what I saw at all. What I saw was shooting pepper balls into I got shot plenty of times with pepper balls, and I got shot in the head with a rubber bullet. I was wearing a helmet, thank God, but I was just in the crowd, and I wasn't running out throwing rocks at anyone. I still got shot a bunch of times. So that kept happening until 9 o'clock, when the atmosphere really changed from the police, and they just decided that it was time to push all the protesters off. And they just started throwing tear gas and flashbangs, just one after the other, into the crowd to push us off of the Capitol and Civic Center Park ground, and shooting pepper balls just through the smoke into the crowd. And they just started advancing on to the Capitol grounds. pushing us off, around the Capitol. At one point, I saw police officers on the balcony of the Capitol shooting down at protesters. And after that, we had kind of just dispersed, and I didn't hear any order to disperse. It was just clouds and clouds of tear gas and just pepper balls shooting out of it, flashbangs everywhere. The crowd kind of just went all over the place at that point, and I left after that because there was really no way to follow any sort of protest at that point. The majority of the people there were there chanting Black Lives Matter, hands up, don't shoot, but that didn't seem to be what the cops wanted to do. It was, we're here to show you we're in charge, we're here to establish dominance, and we're here to make a point. And the point was, these are our streets, and you don't belong here. That's really the point that I got. Because
just to jump in, did you ever throw anything at any officer?
No, not at all. Never once.
That day, did you violate any laws that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, at least. I don't know if public is legal, but.
Tell me about every dispersal order you heard.
I didn't hear dispersal order.
Did you ever see the police shooting from a unique position?
Yeah, the Capitol balcony on the, I guess, south side.
You caught them shooting from the Capitol balcony?
Yeah.
What were they shooting?
Pepper balls.
Okay. When things escalated, did you see a reason? Did you see a provocation from the protesters?
Are you talking about like around 9 o'clock when the tear gas all came in and they just got not really, no. I didn't see any like uptick in rocks or water bottles being thrown or anything. It just seemed like the signal had been given and it was like, hey, it's bedtime, we're gonna get rid of people.
Do you want to tell me just briefly a little bit about the injuries you saw as a medic?
It was mostly tear gas injuries and pepper ball injuries. A lot of bruises from pepper balls. A lot of people who were having breathing problems from tear gas, eye problems. I had one photographer who I treated who was just doubled over for probably 10 or 15 minutes, who he just couldn't move from the tear gas, and he didn't. We kept treating him with milk and baking soda, and you know, he was just trying to get out of there.
And how many people approximately would you say you saw tear gas or pepper ball or pepper sprays?
Oh God. The entire crowd got tear gas. So several hundred people, you know. I think I joke that you know, tear gas is going to be the Cincy scent of 2020, you know, because it's going to, you know, it's. I feel like I still smell like tear gas.
And let me ask just two last questions. Did you see the police targeting any particular people?
It seemed to me that medics were being targeted. If you had a cross on you, it seemed like you were.
Sorry. Sorry, I was on mute and I couldn't get in my objection, but I wanted to objection to foundation.
Okay.
Overruled.
It seemed to me that medics, if you were clearly marked with a red or white cross taped on you, you drew more fire. Now, I can't say for sure if that is the case, but it seems that way to me.
Were you ever hit with projectiles while tending to someone?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And last thing, did you see any particular body parts that seemed to were being targeted with rubber bullets or pepper balls?
Well, I know for sure that I was getting hit on particular body parts. I don't know if they were aiming for them, but I know that I got hit in the head. I got hit on the legs a lot. Thankfully, my groin didn't get hit. Yeah, I was just kind of getting hit all over. But yeah, my head definitely got hit quite a few times in the helmet area.
All right, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Thorne. So I want to go back to the first part of your testimony. You said that you were in front of City Hall at about 5:30 on May 29th, which would be the Friday. Is that correct? And at that time, you said that there were drive-bys, as you called it, right?
Yeah.
And what were you doing? Were you listening to a speaker at that time?
At first, yeah, I was, as I said, I was there as a medic. So I was just kind of following the crowd because I wanted to be where the people were. And so there were several speakers on the steps of City Hall, and I was kind of in the middle of the crowd, and then I started hearing shouts from the north side. So I made my way over there, and I heard pepper balls going off. So I got over there, and I kept seeing police cruisers driving past and either shooting out of the windows, or they would have those cars where the cops are hanging off the side, and they were just driving by and shooting.
Okay. So, Mr. Thorne, when this was occurring, you were in a crowd of people listening to a speaker. Is that correct?
At first, when I first heard it, yes. But by the time I made it my way over there, I could see what was happening. Yes.
And was it a large crowd of people?
Yeah, it was a very large crowd.
All right. And where were you positioned in the crowd?
Well, at the beginning, I was in the middle of the crowd. Then I made my way over to the north side, on the Colfax side of it.
And so, as being in the middle of the crowd, you didn't have a good vantage point of everything that was going on among everybody in the crowd, did you?
At the beginning, I didn't, but once I moved over to the Colfax side, I had a very good vantage.
So, you can't testify here today that there was nobody in that crowd who was throwing objects or doing anything, acts of violence towards the police officers that preceded the use of pepper spray, can you?
Well, there was, to my knowledge, no use of pepper spray. There was the use of pepper balls, and what I did witness was police cruisers driving down Colfax, shooting into a crowd. So I don't know what could possibly warrant that, because those are police officers that are inside cars driving down the street shooting into a crowd.
So your testimony is that police officers were inside patrol cars shooting out the windows, is that right?
Yes, I saw that, as well as police officers driving down the street on the vehicles that they hang off of, shooting into a crowd as they're driving.
Have you filed a complaint about this with Internal Affairs?
No, I filed a lawsuit against the city to make it not happen.
What did you say? I missed that. You asked if you filed a complaint? Well, I didn't hear his answer.
You mentioned that you saw officers shooting from the balcony of the Capitol building, right?
Yes, I did.
And do you know whether those were members of the Colorado State Patrol that were manning the Capitol building?
No, I have no idea. I know that they were dressed the same way that the Denver SWAT, what I assume is Denver SWAT. They were in green body armor, fatigue, with Ops 4 helmets. Which, by the way,
you don't know.
those are
You said that you saw several hundred people subjected to tear gas on the evening of May 29th. Is that correct? How many people do you estimate were present total?
Somewhere between, I'd ballpark between 500 to 1,000 there. And that's a stretch of back. Civic Center Park and Capitol.
And you don't know what every person was doing at the time that the order of, every person in the protest crowd was doing at the time that order to disperse tear gas was given, do you?
I don't know what every person was doing. As I said during my testimony, yes, there were some who were throwing rocks. I agree with the officer's testimony that there was rock throwing and there was water bottle throwing.
Now, did you go back to the protest on May 31st, 2020?
London, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Have you returned any other days?
I haven't been back then, no.
Okay. If you could just give me a moment to confer with my co-counsel, please.
Sure, yeah.
Mr. Thorne, do you have any plans to go back to continue protesting in Denver?
I do. I meant to go on Juneteenth, but I had a baby, so I couldn't go. But we are, some friends of mine and I are planning to go back again. It is really nice having this order in place because I'm protesting right now.
All right, and you're aware that a new law was passed in Colorado regarding protest? Okay. I have no other questions.
Okay, redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor.
Next witness.
Your Honor, thank you. Your Honor, we call Zoe Harshman. Zoe, are you there?
Kelly, somebody?
Zoe, Z-O-E-Y. There we go.
D-O-E-Y.
Sorry.
Z as in zebra.
Oh, Z. Zoe. Zoe whom?
Harshman. H-A-R-S-H-M-A-N.
All right. Ms. Harshman, do you raise your hand, please? Do you swear or affirm you will tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Go ahead.
Ms. Harshman, I want to ask you specifically about an incident that happened outside the Capitol building where you got pepper sprayed. Do you know what date that happened?
It was about 2 Thursdays ago, I believe. I don't remember the date exactly.
Was it after the temporary restraining order was entered by this court?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Ms. Harshman, if you could tell us what you experienced on that day.
It was, for the most part, it was just a normal day. We marched the streets a bit, chanted a few different things. But at one point, I ended up getting hit by a car, and my girlfriend, or everyone was telling my girlfriend that we need to press charges, and so my girlfriend called 911 to get someone down there to file a report because I got hit by a car while I was on the sidewalk, and they said that they were unable to come to us, and that if we wanted help, we had to go somewhere else. And the car ended up driving off. And after that, we went up about a block. And holding the traffic for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the time that George Floyd was choked to death. And at one point, officers showed up. They just started arresting one of my friends who was in the crosswalk while the crosswalk sign was on. They just started arresting him. And we were trying to ask why he was being arrested. A couple people were chanting, let him go. And they just kept arresting him. And then one dude came out with a can of mace and just started spraying everybody. I then was trying to, while I was blind, and so was my girlfriend, I was trying to find my girlfriend. And I got hit with a second spray then. And then right when I finally found her, he sprayed her and just her and I with a third spray.
Okay, I
pulled her out of the.
When your girlfriend got sprayed, what was she doing at the time?
Sorry, what was that?
When your girlfriend got sprayed, what was she doing at the time? Can you hear me?
Which one? When she got sprayed the second or third time?
Why don't you tell me all three times what she was doing in each one of those instances?
Okay, so the first time, she was trying to ask the officers why they were arresting our friend. And that's when the first spray hit. The second time, she was trying to pull out other people that were being sprayed. And then the third time, she was just kind of disoriented and blinded and couldn't really figure out how to, like, where the sidewalk was to get to safety. And then when I finally found her, I pulled her away after we got hit by the third spray.
Did you hear a warning to disperse during any of those three times?
I did not hear any such warning.
Okay. Ms. Hartman, did you see what the officers' reactions were to you getting sprayed?
At one point, once I could finally see again, I saw two of the officers like pointing at me and a couple other people had been sprayed and just laughing.
Okay. Did you try to find out the identity of these officers?
When we asked for badge numbers, they just ignored it and did not. Like we asked for name and badge numbers, they just ignored what we were saying and just acted like they didn't even hear us.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hartman. I don't have any further questions.
Cross-examination.
Hello, Ms. Hartman. I want to understand the series of events. Where had you been struck by the car?
It was on Colfax and Lincoln while I was on the southeast corner on the sidewalk.
And was there any protest activity going on at that intersection?
Yes, there was.
Was the street blocked?
For 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Okay. And so when you called 911, was the street blocked there?
Not anymore, no.
Okay. Did you understand that when the 911 operator asked you to move somewhere else for assistance, it was because of difficulty for first responders to come to you?
I understood that was what it was at the time, but then when they were able to show up an hour later to mace me, it seemed to be a false statement.
Was there emergency medical response? Was there an ambulance that came, or was there any fire department that came, or was it just police officers?
Just police officers.
Okay, and so just so I understand, you had there was an 8 minute and 46 second street blockage when you got struck by the car, and then were you repeating that protest at a different location?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so when the police arrived an hour later, that was at another time where that protest was happening?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And my understanding from what you just testified to, there was somebody being arrested during that protest? And who was that?
I actually know his name. He's a friend of ours, but I don't know his actual name.
Okay.
I just know him by
do you know what he was being arrested for?
I believe what he said the next day was that he was arrested for obstructing traffic, even though he was in a crosswalk with the walk sign at the time.
How big of a group were you with at that time?
I'd say it was probably still about 30 strong.
Okay. How many officers were involved in the arrest of that other protester?
The two specifically arresting, or every officer there?
The number of officers there.
It looked to be about like 15, 20.
Okay. Did 30 protesters approach the officers who were making the arrest?
Questioning as to why they were arrested.
Okay. I think you dropped off there at the end.
Yeah, they were approaching him, asking why he was being arrested.
Did you approach as well?
Yes, I did.
And how close did you get?
I was right there the whole time. The guy they arrested was standing right next to me and my girlfriend.
Okay. So while they were, sorry, Ms. Hartman, I didn't hear that last sentence.
I said initially they had actually approached us.
Okay. Did the police officers ask you to move away while they were taking the other protester into custody?
I did not hear that, no.
Did you see when you had pepper spray, did you see the officer remove the spray from his belt?
No. The first time I saw it was when it was up in the air, like half a second before it started spraying.
Okay. How big was that canister?
Like a can of spray paint. And it had like a little handle coming off of it.
Okay. Did you file a complaint with the Denver Police Department?
Not yet, but I do plan to, now that I know about of the process of how to do it.
Okay. Have you requested any of the documentation related to this incident from the Denver Police Department?
No, but I believe that Milo has. That was my understanding.
Okay. And you're not a plaintiff in this lawsuit, are you? I've lost the witness. Has everybody else?
I have, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, look on. She's out of the room. What would you like us to do, Your Honor?
Can she try again and log back in?
She can try. In the meantime, Your Honor, I have another witness I can call. It'll take a very small amount of time.
Your time is over.
Yes, sir.
Finish up with the witness you've got if you want, but your time is up.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, we can be done with this witness. We don't want to delay this anymore. So I have no further questions.
Maybe he's got some redirect.
Okay.
That's okay, Your Honor. We can move on.
All right, and we're done with the evidence. Now, I allowed 15 minutes aside for argument. And I'll let you go ahead and use your 15 minutes. But I still am where I was when we began the hearing. What you've presented today, have I lost the defendants now too? No, there they are.
No.
What you presented today is this. The police officers testified, and the substance of their testimony is, with the exception of the one video, perhaps, they didn't detect any inappropriate conduct. They've been trained in the use of force, and they basically don't need any further supervision from the court. That I infer from their testimony. But their testimony was pretty clear. What they saw, what they experienced, what they knew, the officers were responding to violence, responding appropriately. They weren't aware of anything wrong. On the other hand, the plaintiffs have presented witnesses from people who were there protesting, and a couple of the witnesses, at least, the fellow from Broomfield and the medic, credibly said that where they were, people were peaceful, and the officers were not. The medic said that he saw rocks and bottles being thrown, but in response to being hit with pepper balls and so forth. The young woman is angry, let's say. And she was arrested, and it didn't seem like there was an appropriate basis for it. All of this relates to the time frame, with the exception of the last woman, May 20 through May 31st. And the incident, as described on the Thursday after that, to me still seems vague as to what happened and why it happened. But you're all talking about history now. You're all talking about things that occurred back then. This order came after most of that. The new statute came after all of that. You're talking about an injunction going forward. And it is not at all clear to me why you're trying to convince me of things that I've already been convinced of. I wouldn't have issued the temporary restraining order if I didn't think that there were instances of police misconduct, and I still think so. And I think your witnesses who testified for the police have blinders on to some extent. On the other hand, there is no question but that people were violent, some of them. People were throwing large rocks, small rocks, water bottles, chunks of cement, vandalizing, starting fires. The two sides here just won't see what the other side is saying. But right now, I have to deal with a situation where somebody wants an injunction, and you're going to have to tell me why I should issue one, given what's happened since I issued the order that I did. All right, plaintiff, you may go first. You have 15 minutes max.
Yes, Your Honor. As the court said, the court has already found the elements for the TRO, which are basically identical to the elements of a preliminary injunction.
Yes, I found that based on what was presented at that time. Things have changed.
Yes, Your Honor, and we have a chicken or the egg scenario. The defendant would like you to believe that things have changed because the protesters have gotten better. The plaintiffs will say things have changed because this lawsuit was filed, the injunction was entered, and the police are now scared to violate these laws.
Things have changed because the legislature of the state of Colorado, on a very rush basis, passed a new law that enacted the basics of what my order required.
That's right, Your Honor.
That's what's happened. It could be that my order was a motivator. I don't know that. What I do know is that it took an act of Congress, so to speak, as well as an act of a court to get these things done. And for the police to say that they policed their own and there was nothing wrong is nonsense. But their attention has been gotten. The legislation has been passed. And I don't really understand why this court or any other court has any basis to keep interfering in something that's over and that has been dealt with by the statute. I also don't understand why you won't accept what the defendants have offered, and that is, believe it or not, they've offered a preliminary injunction. They've offered an injunction that requires not just compliance with the statute, but some additional things. And you don't seem interested. I don't get it. So explain it to me.
Yes, Your Honor.
What more do you want?
Your Honor, we do appreciate that the defendant has come to the table and has agreed to the injunction. There's only two disputes right now as far as the language of the injunction. The first is that the sergeant has to personally witness it, and we even agreed to the defendant's language absent exigent circumstances, which should cover the court's concerns and should cover defendant's concerns that if there's an emergency situation, that the sergeant can't view the specific thing happen, that the officer's allowed to act. That's what exigent circumstances mean.
Right, they've agreed to that. They've agreed to that.
No, they haven't. They have not agreed.
They absolutely have. That's what the testimony of Phelan was.
Your Honor, I will say, I've had this specific conversation. They did not agree to personally witnessing what happened. Even with the exigent
Let me remind you what Phelan said, and he's the highest officer that represents. I've got it right in my notes. He said a couple of things that I thought were pretty significant. One thing, just so it doesn't slip my mind, that he said that was very significant was that Denver does take responsibility for the actions of non-Denver officers whom they bring in to assist because they are, Phelan said, our agents. I thought that was quite significant. And he said also that the, quote, sergeant on the scene, close quote, is a good idea. And it is desirable that their sergeant be there and, if possible, personally see what happened. But there are situations where a sergeant is there, yes. But he just didn't happen to see whatever it was, and so he needed to rely on what he was told. He said that. You got that.
Okay, Your Honor, then I'll move on with that understanding.
And what is it that you want that you don't that you're requiring of them? What else do you want?
The use of force. That the city has refused to agree that other officers that come into the city of Denver have to follow Denver's use of force. And let me just speak to that for a second, Your Honor. The Denver Police Department is accountable to the citizens of Denver. They're accountable to the city council. They're accountable to the mayor.
He said that. Phelan said there are agents. We're responsible for them. He also said they've trained their officers in use of force. We train our officers in use of force. Their officers have to follow their training, but Denver is responsible. He said that.
Yes, Your Honor, I agree, as to Denver officers. He also said that if Arapahoe County or Aurora comes in, they get to follow their own procedures, which are not accountable to the citizens of Denver.
Okay.
And the plaintiffs would like everything to filter down to Denver's use of force policy.
Well, now we're speculating that some future event is going to occur where Denver calls in the officers from Arapahoe County, and the officers from Arapahoe County have different training, and so they're going to be acting inappropriately, even though Denver will be trying to do things right. I don't issue injunctions based on what might happen.
Your Honor, this is not what might happen. Commander Phelan said that they have contracts with other jurisdictions outside of Denver, and that he does not expect those outside jurisdictions to follow Denver's use of force.
Okay, sir, what are the use of force standards for Arapahoe County?
As I sit here, I don't know the answer to that.
You don't know whether they're the same as Denver's or not, right? You just don't know that. You don't know whether these local jurisdictions are in any way, shape, or form different from Denver. And more importantly, now that they know what the legislature required of Denver, you don't know whether these other agencies are going to the extent, if at all, their procedures are different, change their procedures to fit what the legislature clearly wants. You don't know.
Your Honor, the use of force provision in SB 217 doesn't go into effect until September 1st.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I thought the statute said it's effective immediately.
It says, except for, let me try to find the correct statute, Your Honor. It does say, except, let me see, right here I have it.
I thought it absolutely went into effect immediately. You're telling me it doesn't? And the Denver people don't have to follow it until September?
There's different effective dates for different provisions of the bill. Section 4 of the bill doesn't take effect until September 1st, 2020. Section 5 of the bill doesn't take effect until September 1st, 2020, except for the chokehold provision.
Well, I don't even know what those different sections are. I don't have the thing in front of me. Why aren't you asking them to agree that they will implement these things immediately then?
I believe we've come to agree to that. That's part of what they've agreed to for the preliminary injunction.
If that's the case, why are you asking for an injunction? If they've agreed to it, I'll issue the injunction. I don't think you've shown me that you're entitled to an injunction. But if they've agreed to an injunction, I'll issue it.
Yes, Your Honor. One of the things that you stated in your order is that different laws existed prior to this, and the constitutional rights existed prior to this. And your quote was, officers would continue to use force, secure in the knowledge that respective claims take a significant amount of time, effort, and money to pursue. And that hasn't changed. This law is passed, and that's great. But in order to stop this again, if Denver starts again tomorrow, and they start shooting rubber bullets at people tomorrow, and these protests are still going on, but nothing stops them from shooting rubber bullets, and then the claimants have to file a lawsuit, wait for discovery, wait for a jury verdict. And that shows irreparable harm under the standard.
Okay.
Because they can't have it.
Then if that happens, you can come back and ask this court or some other court for another restraining order. I don't think that the Denver Police Department is going to go willy-nilly violating that new statute, especially since they've done away with qualified immunity and made the officers individually liable. And I think there's a provision in there also that if you're caught doing something contrary to the order, you're going to lose your ability to be a police officer. I don't think those are minor things.
Okay, Your Honor, we've made our arguments of the changes we want. However, if the court believes that the changes as the defendant has stipulated to are appropriate, we will agree to enter into that preliminary injunction.
What I'm asking is, what do you want besides what they're already ordered to do or willing to do? And so far, what you've told me is you want them to require non-jurisdiction officers to follow the Denver police standards. So far, that's the only thing you've said.
And there's only one other thing, Your Honor, and that is an enforcement mechanism. And what I mean by the enforcement mechanism is you described the incident that Billy Harshman described as vague, and we agree with you. We're not saying one way or the other that it was inappropriate because all of the cards are in the hands of the police department. They have sent us to the CCJRA to get those records, which is full of discretion for the police department. They have said that they have sent that request to the records custodian. That happened like 2 weeks ago. We have not heard from any records custodian. All we would like to do is have a process in place to be able to get a disclosure that force of the type that was prohibited was used, to get reports that were involved in the incident, and to get the body cam footage involved.
Well,
now, we have...
Who anointed you, Mr. Zev? Who anointed you or those people that you represent as the overseers of the Denver Police Department?
Your Honor, you're right. Nobody has enforced that, but we've asked for other mechanisms, and we haven't gotten any suggestions on how we can. We have people claiming to us that was an inappropriate use of force in violation of the TRO, but without any sort of mechanism to monitor it, the plaintiffs are blind to whether the defendant violates the TRO or not.
Okay.
And the defendant hasn't offered any alternatives.
All right. Let me hear from the other side now.
Thank you, Your Honor. We believe there's no need for a preliminary injunction to be entered.
You've already agreed to it. You've already agreed to it.
We offered that as a compromise to avoid to obviate the need for a hearing today. Since we had to put on evidence and hearing the evidence that was presented by the plaintiffs, we did not concede in the first place that the elements were met, and certainly through the presentation of evidence today, the plaintiffs did not meet their burden of demonstrating the elements show it that they're entitled to a preliminary injunction.
So you're representing the city and county of Denver and the Denver Police Department, and you're going to renege on a deal. You made a deal. You offered. And now you're going to take it back? Your deal is the reason I'm saying that I'm not inclined to issue an injunction, because I think between the statute and what you agreed to do, we're there. But now you're reneging. Wow, I can't believe it.
No. Let me clarify, because that is not what I'm intending to say, and it sounds like my message is being miscommunicated. So what I'm saying is Denver, of course, is going to follow the new law. That's statute 24-31-905 is the section that addresses kinetic impact projectiles, chemical agents, and irritants, and that section goes into effect immediately. The section that Mr. Z was talking about is another section of the law. So the section that is at issue and that we agreed to, and of course we will follow the law, is in effect as of last Friday when the governor signed the bill, June 19th. So the other item that we're willing to agree to was, and we can enter a stipulation with them about the use of body cameras in moments of, I can't remember what the word, but confrontation with other people. We can enter in stipulation with them about that.
Okay, let me stop you there, please. Maybe we're hung up, or you're hung up, or your client is hung up on the word injunction. It doesn't have to be an injunction. I mean, we're not here to parse words now. If you lawyers could only stop being antagonists for a moment, why can't you enter into an agreement, an enforceable, written, signed agreement, where you put forward these things that you've agreed to do in a way that you're bound, but it's not called an injunction? Why haven't you done that?
We have agreed to, what I'm saying is that you're absolutely right, Your Honor. We do not want to concede that the elements of an injunction have been made here. Primarily, there's the likelihood of the merits, the specter of irreparable harm. Also, we don't believe there's standing and there's mootness issues as well from the new bill. We are willing to enter a stipulation with the opposing side about the items that we've been able to reach agreement on.
And about the things,
sticking point-
and also about the things that Phelan testified to in his testimony. You
Well,
can't back
let me,
away from that.
address one of-
You cannot back away from that.
let me address one thing that you've talked about with regard to Commander Phelan's testimony, and that is regard to the question of whether other law enforcement agencies are agents and Denver is claiming responsibility for every one of their actions. Now, as Commander Phelan testified to, the chief of police is the one, and above him, the executive director of the Department of Safety is the person who's been buying the city on those types of things. And so Commander Phelan giving his opinion on that matter does not bind the city on that. And in fact, under Colorado law, independent jurisdictions are not agents under another government. It depends on whether there's a right to control the other. And that case is Clark versus
I don't want to hear about that case, man. If you're going to back away from what Phelan said, and he's the guy you put on the stand twice now, 2 different hearings. If you're going to back away from his testimony, I'll order that they're agents. I already have. And I'm not going to back away from that. So let's get real here. I'll issue an injunction and put all this stuff in there that you've agreed to, and you'll be bound by it. And then you can appeal it. Or you can sit down with the lawyers. I've been trying to get you to do that for 2 weeks and reach a stipulation, put it in writing, and it will bind everybody but not be called an injunction. Now, instead, if you want to cite your cases and say that they don't have standing and this and that, fine.
Well, Your Honor,
Go talk to the 10th Circuit about what it means to renege on a deal.
Your Honor, one of the terms that we could not agree on, which is why we went to the hearing today, was this issue of expedited discovery that the plaintiffs have insisted in be included into any sort of stipulation.
I'm not going to require that no matter what kind of an order I issue, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay. As for standing and mootness, as we stated in our brief, we don't believe the plaintiffs have shown that they're risk of imminent harm, which is necessary to establish standing. All they've alleged is the past injury. Notably, they do have a damages claim in this case, so they can continue on that. The passage of the law recently changed the circumstances in Colorado dramatically. As I've said, Denver is going to comply with the law. Also, we've heard testimony that nothing that has existed in the city, like the violence of the first few days of the protest, and the nature of the harm the plaintiffs are seeking is only speculative, and that is not sufficient to establish standing for a preliminary injunction or to meet the irreparable harm component of the injunction. Also, as far as the likelihood of success on the merits, we would like to point out that this is a municipal liability claim against Denver, and their burden is to demonstrate that there's a custom, policy, or practice of Denver that has violated the constitutional rights of the individually named plaintiffs.
Yes, I'm very familiar with Manel law. You're just reading your argument off your notes, and it's not communicating. You're not listening to me, and maybe you just don't care. I'm suggesting that you've agreed on certain things. You can put them in a writing. You can sign it. It's binding. The court wouldn't issue an injunction. They've got what they need. You've agreed to what they really need, and we all go home. No, you won't do that.
Yes, we can agree to a stipulation, yes, on the terms that we've talked about.
All right, then have it on my desk by 10 o'clock in the morning. Signed.
Okay.
Can you do that?
We can do that on the terms that we agree to, yes.
will you, lawyer plaintiff, sit down with her and bang out a stipulation that says what I've said I'd agree to?
Absolutely, Your Honor.
Because that's your best chance right now. Let me tell you, that's your best chance.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then get to work and see if you can have something by mid-morning tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Court is in recess.
Been disconnected from the meeting.
We're sorry, your conference is ending now. Please hang up.